The man confidently reasoned that he would be able to learn, listened to the strange voice, and convinced himself that even without a mentor, his instincts would inevitably awaken. The man reaches out to her and starts talking, but she pushes him away, disagreeing and trying to keep her distance. He calmly asserts that instincts do not fail him and asks himself whether people are worse than animals if they doubt. Approaching again, he hints at Celia, testing her reaction and increasing the internal tension. He kisses her tenderly, and the lady feels a thrill and tremor, but she is unable to pull away from him. The man gently hugs her, calms her down, and assures her that she can handle it, trying to dispel her fear of him. His gaze becomes serious. He acknowledges his danger, but asks not to run away and to help him stay better. Holding back the darkness within, he asks her to be by his side always, clinging to her as his only support. Celia suddenly comes to after a strange dream, breathing heavily and confusedly, trying to understand what it was. An image of a man with a frighteningly calm expression comes to mind, causing her to feel anxious. She winces and clutches her head, feeling a vague uneasiness and a vague connection with what she saw. Looking around the room, Celia gradually returns to reality, trying to make sure that everything around her is real. Exhaling nervously, she still feels tense, as if the dream has left behind a disturbing trace. Her gaze falls on the cage where the wounded creature sleeps, and the feeling grows stronger inside her that all this is not accidental. Celia stood in the middle of a quiet street, but her gaze was filled with anxiety, caused by increasingly frequent thoughts of monster attacks. The memory of the recent purge calmed her slightly, but this calm seemed fragile and temporary. Noticing the strange child, she froze, looking more closely, as if trying to unravel the hidden threat. Clutching the bundle tighter, Celia felt the weight of her own decision, in which doubts were increasingly appearing. The anxiety grew, and, tensing up, she clearly realized that her actions could lead to unpredictable consequences. Celia freezes in the middle of the street, looking at the old woman in bewilderment. She's trying to figure out how she appeared next to her unnoticed. The old woman slowly raises her hand, and an ominous energy flares in the air, causing the space to tremble. A stream of power crashes around her, and Celia recoils, feeling the tension grip her body. Gathering her will, she peers into what is happening and recognizes the ancient spell emanating from the stranger. A majestic image appears before her, and Celia freezes, realizing that she has encountered the power of another world. When she asks about the past, she calmly admits that she was once called that. In response, a doubt arises. If this is in the past, does this mean that now everything is different and more dangerous? She calmly explains that fox demons are born with one tail, and with each century their number grows, reflecting their strength. Then, with barely concealed tension, she points to the nine-tailed cub as something out of the ordinary. Celia doubtfully suggests that the fox is 900 years old. The response is a calm denial and a hint of a much more ancient existence. Then a name is called, and the silence is filled with the weight of realization, followed by the revelation of an ancient teaching about the power that can rise to the heavens. She coldly reveals the truth about the monster, warning of an impending threat to the entire continent. Celia asks in a reserved tone what to do now, recalling her previous decision. In response, there is only a quiet hesitation, filled with internal struggle. And suddenly the silence is broken by a surge of power as the decision takes on a frightening decisiveness. She leans closer, blurring the lines between fear and attraction, leaving Celia frozen in confusion. Celia gathers her courage and demands a name, trying to maintain her slipping control. The priestess calmly calls her Celia, as if this name had long belonged to her. She then orders him to be raised and sent away one day, as if it were an inevitable path. Hearing this, Celia asks again, with alarm, not believing in the fate that has been laid upon her. The priestess reveals that the creature is capable of taking on human form, and therefore its nature remains a mystery. She warns that everything depends on upbringing, because he can become either a heavenly wolf or a spirit of destruction. Then her voice turns cold, and she demands that he be destroyed as soon as he reaches the eastern continent. This order contains a threat. Only in this way can Celia preserve her former life. Celia, squeezing her hand, asks again in confusion, trying to understand the value of these words. Celia tries to object, speaking of the eastern continent, but the priestess calmly dismisses any doubts and declares her intention to act on her own. After her words, a heavy silence falls, in which Celia is left alone with the surging thoughts. Finally, she quietly calls out to the priestess, as if clinging to an elusive support. The priestess firmly demands that Celia do this, leaving no room for doubt or weakness. She convinces him that otherwise he will become a demon and asks him to just believe her words. Left alone, Celia stands in uneasy silence, clutching at a choice she can no longer escape. Celia looks at him and tries to accept the idea that she must raise this fragile creature. Her gaze falls on the cage, and a quiet realization sounds inside. She must take care of him, despite her fear. The space is filled with doubt, because a person should not raise a fox cub with such a fate. The trembling in her hand betrays an anxiety that can no longer be hidden, and yet, looking at him, she understands. One day she will have to do what she so wants to avoid. Celia announces the end of the training session, trying to sound confident despite her fatigue. The response is a friendly one, filled with respect and inspiration. Left alone, she slowly walks away, allowing the silence to cover her troubled thoughts. Doubts about the correctness of one's actions and the gravity of the choice made arise inside. Hearing the address, she turns around, hiding her inner excitement. Eric appears in front of her, and in that moment, one senses the beginning of a new conversation. Celia stops, reacting to his awkward approach, and a slight surprise flashes in her gaze. Eric, collecting his thoughts, explains about the night operation and carefully hints that she is exhausting herself too much with training. Celia calmly notes that there have been more missions lately, and there is a hidden weariness in her voice. She firmly adds that the harder the training, the more nights will be able to survive. Eric quickly agrees, feeling the weight of her words and finding no objections. Celia is already turning away when he fervently promises to remember this and follow her example. Celia notices her condition worsening and tries to remain calm, hiding her growing anxiety. Left alone, she clutches her temples, realizing that there is no one to ask for help, but casting aside her doubts, she decides to go to the end. Because all this is for him and there is no turning back. She bursts in screaming, losing her composure at the mere sight of the dangerous creature. In a panic, she demands that it be removed, not believing that the captain would dare to commit such madness. Choking with fear, she explains that it is a nine-tailed fox that devours the life force of people. And with bitter disappointment, she realizes that she was called not to heal, but to face a monster. She refuses to sit back until things get worse, and under pressure, demands an immediate solution from Celia. Celia asks anxiously why the medicine isn't working, not hiding her growing anxiety. The response is a dry agreement, and it becomes clear that the reason is much deeper and more dangerous. Shula tenses, looking away, and her silence is uncertain, as if she herself is unable to utter the answer. Shula freezes, a confused realization flashing in her eyes that she desperately tries to turn into a joke. She nervously waves it off, convincing herself that this is all a ridiculous coincidence and cannot be true. But faced with Celia's calm, he loses confidence and begins to doubt his own words. Celia firmly explains the nature of the creature and shares the knowledge she chooses to trust. In response, Shula hesitantly acknowledges the trust, but wonders if they would trust her in the same way after the past. Shula flinches when the fox cub calls, and there's something alarmingly alive in the sound. She flares up, indignant and cursing, unable to accept what is happening and her own powerlessness. In the silence, knowledge emerges of a priestess whose power, despite her banishment, still remains considerable. Celia, thinking about what she heard, is inclined to believe that these words can still be trusted. But Shula doesn't back down and asks the main question, questioning Celia's very choice. Celia reflects on the differences between the gods and decides that she can raise this creature despite the prohibitions. She is overcome with doubt, and her thoughts echo with a confused lack of understanding of what is happening. The priestess's words about duty and a threat that cannot be ignored come to mind. But Celia doesn't accept this completely, wondering why she should be the one to make the choice. In silence comes the awareness of one's own role and responsibility, which can no longer be escaped. And remembering the past, she understands that she is obliged to protect the one who once saved her life. Shula admits that she followed him day and night, but she increasingly doubts whether she is doing the right thing. She explains haltingly that she was supposed to treat the monster, but she can barely contain her nerves. Then he quietly apologizes and nevertheless agrees to help, despite his fear and uncertainty. She carefully extends her hand, trying not to hurt, as if afraid of destroying the fragile trust. In her doubts, she speaks of a future where she will be considered insane even if she treats him. Celia, observing this, suddenly asks a simple question that momentarily breaks all the tension. Shula confidently declares that it is a male, but the fox cub immediately snaps back, showing his difficult character. She sighs, realizing that raising him will not be easy, and estimates how long it will take. Celia calmly estimates the deadline, and then suddenly changes the conversation, testing her on her personal plans. Shula shyly waves her hand, but receives an equally cold response that leaves no room for unnecessary topics. Celia quietly admits that she is content with her debt and what has already been given to her. Shula, watching her, involuntarily admires her strength, but feels something alarming about it. A warning rings through her mind that such a path could one day break even her. Shula reports that the treatment is complete, and the fox cub falls asleep peacefully, as if the storm had temporarily subsided. She adds that the recovery will be quick, trying to dispel the anxiety hanging in the air. Celia thanks her softly, and for the first time there is genuine hope in that warm look. Shula notes with a slight smile that such kindness makes people naive and vulnerable. Celia freezes, not immediately finding an answer, but wariness appears in her gaze. She asks directly if Shula is sure of her words, without accepting them without question, and then Shula, more seriously, hints that Celia herself does not fully understand who she really is. Shula flares up, not understanding how anyone could decide to do such a thing, and bombards Celia with anxious questions about the fox. She warns him passionately of the danger, but Celia calmly declares that she will not allow him to come to harm. Shula continues to doubt, but Celia firmly denies the influence of magic and stands by her decision. She explains that the fox is still weak and needs care, despite his nature. But deep in her mind, a fear flares up of what might happen if things go wrong. And faced with this thought, Celia is momentarily at a loss, unable to completely suppress her doubts. In the silence, Celia feels a fragile warmth and thinks about how easily this small creature could disappear. She strokes him and decides that one day she will let him go, even if it hurts. Wishes for strength, freedom, and a simple, happy life are born in her thoughts. But looking at him, she freezes, feeling something greater than duty growing inside her. Celia recalls that she was not even deprived of life, but simply left at the castle, as if she were unwanted. Having almost died from monsters, she was still saved and ended up in a shelter thanks to a priest. Looking back, she admits that her childhood was difficult, but it still became a refuge for her. But the real problem was hidden deeper, in her dreams, where fear began to take shape. At night, Celia writhes in pain, not understanding where this unbearable fear comes from. Alien voices brand her a monster, and in the darkness, it sounds like a death sentence. She is held down by force, not allowing her to escape, until her body loses control. The cursed brand flashes, and with it comes the realization that from this moment on, she will no longer be seen as the same. Behind Celia's back, they whisper, calling her a witch and a monster. And these words slowly penetrate her soul. The priests discuss her fear and reaction, increasingly leaning towards the idea of a curse. They fear that being close to her will bring trouble, remembering the misfortune that has already happened. Gradually, the conversation changes, and a cold calculation about her fate appears in it. The solution sounds merciless: send her away and hide the truth in order to maintain order. And Celia, hiding, hears all this, and for the first time truly understands her loneliness. Little Celia sits to the side, already feeling out of place among the other children. The conviction grows stronger in my thoughts that she is cursed, and that is why she was abandoned. The sudden blow makes her flinch, but the pain is already familiar and hardly surprising. Other people's words hurt more, blaming her and turning her into an outcast. And under these gazes, she remains alone, as if in front of a crowd of shadows ready to tear her apart from the inside. Above her, a cold reminder of gift and prohibition sounds, where power becomes not a blessing, but a heavy burden. She is forced to remain silent and obey, being told that any resistance will only worsen her fate. The voices merge into a noise of accusations, where she is no longer a person, but a mistake and a curse. Waking up, Celia breathes heavily, trying to escape the clinging memories. She squeezes herself, gathering her remaining strength, as if relearning to maintain a fragile balance. Celia convinces herself to leave the past behind and use the power she has been given as a shield, not a curse. In her thoughts, she builds a path to become closer to Solar, to serve and to find a new purpose. By squeezing the pain, she asserts her right to live, not allowing fear to break her, and in this determination, a quiet promise is born. Her fate will not end as expected of her. Celia turns around, sensing the change. The fox cub was already completely healed. The wounds disappeared in an instant. She looks at him with surprise and wariness, and concludes, he may even be more resilient than a troll. Celia looks closely at the fox in the cage, realizing that in front of her is not just an animal, but a dangerous creature hiding its true nature. In response to her gaze, the fox suddenly comes to life. His eyes flash, and he lets out an aggressive roar, filling the space with tension. Despite this, Celia remains calm, her expression softening, and she watches the fox's behavior without fear. She understands that behind this aggression, there is a natural need and perceives his reaction as a sign of need. Celia carefully moves the saucer of water towards the cage, realizing that the fox is weakened by the loss of blood, and gently encourages him to quench his thirst. The fox cub cautiously reaches for the water, his golden eyes carefully watching his surroundings. But thirst takes over, and he begins to drink. Celia watches him from the side, trying not to scare him, and calmly convinces him that this is ordinary water and there is no danger. However, the next moment the fox suddenly starts to move. His body tenses, and he breaks into an aggressive reaction, hitting the bars of the cage. Celia pauses, realizing that waiting for him to weaken won't be easy, and doubt begins to creep into her gaze. Despite the risk, she reaches her hand closer, trying to show that she means no harm, and gently tries to win his trust. Celia carefully picks up the fox cub, holding him gently but firmly, and notices how he freezes in surprise in her palms. She holds him closer, reassuring him, her voice and movements warm, as if trying to convince him that there is nothing left to fear. A sincere tenderness appears in her gaze, and watching him, Celia involuntarily feels touched by his small and defenseless appearance. She touches him carefully, trying to understand if she has hurt him, and carefully watches his reaction, not wanting to harm him. The fox gradually relaxes in her arms, and Celia, noticing this, begins to seriously think about giving him more freedom. Ultimately, she decides not to lock him up anymore, allowing him to move freely, staying close, and continuing to care for him. The fox suddenly climbs onto Celia's shoulder, clinging to her, and she feels his closeness, momentarily losing her usual calm. Her gaze changes abruptly, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes, as if she suddenly realizes the true reason for his behavior. When the fox takes off, Celia reacts instantly, rushing after him and not allowing him to escape from the room. In a deft move, she grabs him, despite his resistance and furious growl, holding him firmly but without cruelty. Even in her arms, he continues to snap, showing his fangs. But Celia is already sure that his previous submissiveness was just a pretense. The fox suddenly grabs Celia's arm, his fangs piercing the skin, and she feels a sharp pain, not having time to react immediately. She steps back, trying to hold him back, blood seeping onto her clothes. But even at this moment, there is more concern in her voice than anger. Celia pulls herself together, her gaze softens, and she tries to calm the enraged creature without letting go. However, the fox only grins more intensely, his eyes full of wildness, saliva, and blood mixing, emphasizing his dangerous nature. Despite the pain, Celia doesn't push him away, allowing him to bite again, as if accepting it as part of the inevitable. Celia, despite the blood and wounds, calmly holds the fox cub in her arms, noticing how his fur is soaked with saliva and blood after the outburst of aggression. Her face remains soft and focused, and in her mind she reassures herself that no one will harm him, as if taking responsibility for it. Even when he continues to bare his teeth and struggle, she only tries to calm him down more quietly and tenderly, showing neither fear nor irritation. Gradually, her hand carefully lowers to his head, and, despite the resistance, her movements remain gentle, trying to calm his wildness. Celia locks the fox in the cage again, her gaze becoming stern because he broke the trust, and now she is forced to show firmness. She leans closer, calmly explaining that he will still have a chance, but only if he stops acting aggressively and tries to change. In the reflection of his golden eyes, Celia sees herself and understands that the choice now depends not only on her, but on him as well. She moves the water closer again, patiently offering him to quench his thirst, hoping that he will accept her care. However, the fox stubbornly remains in place, ignoring the proposal, and the tension between them does not disappear. Celia only sighs, realizing that the road to trust will be long and much more difficult than she expected. Celia stands in the room, deep in thought, her gaze growing heavier as she clearly considers what is happening and searches for a solution. The fox sits silently in the cage, stubbornly turning away from the water, and a tense, dull silence hangs between them. Later, already on the street, Celia returns from work, with a subordinate walking next to her, reporting on the completion of the operation. He reports that the others are also returning, and the situation is gradually returning to normal after a stressful day. Celia, without losing her seriousness, notes that the situation is getting worse. There are more monsters, and this can no longer be ignored. Her thoughts return to the fox, realizing that he refuses to eat everything that is given to him, and this mystery only increases her anxiety. Celia walks down the street at night, lost in thought, and comes to the conclusion that there is something more hidden in the fox's behavior than simple wildness. She remembers how he reacted sharply to her movements, especially when she reached out to him, and begins to see this as not an accident. An image of a frightened creature, chained and accustomed to cruel treatment from people, arises in her imagination. Celia frowns as she analyzes the situation and allows for the thought that the fox could have been with the people of the eastern continent before meeting her. Darkness thickens around the image of the monster, and accumulated grievances and rage are reflected in its appearance, slowly distorting the mind and turning feelings into something sinister. A dark realization arises in the heroine's thoughts that inaction will lead to a tragedy where she will have to end someone else's life herself, coming to terms with a difficult choice. At night, under the soft light of the lanterns, the knight Enrique awkwardly apologizes to the captain, feeling guilty, and she accepts his words with restraint. Enrique, blushing with embarrassment, shares a memory of pets, hoping to find understanding and relieve the tension. Hearing the question, Knight Enrique perks up and enthusiastically confirms his experience, trying to appear more confident in front of the captain. In a warm recollection, the knight Enrique smiles and talks about the dog Brahms, with whom he grew up, while Celia listens silently, hiding her thoughts. He notes with nostalgia that the dog was an excellent hunter, and his voice sounds genuine pride for his faithful friend from the past. Celia watches him closely, tilting her head slightly, and asks a clarifying question, showing a restrained interest in Enrique's story. Celia then brushes off the unnecessary and explains that she asked the question for a reason, hinting at a hidden reason for her curiosity. With a slight thoughtfulness, Celia recalls the habits of dogs and their connection with the moon, and her gaze becomes deeper and more attentive. Knight Enrique shares his dog's simple joys with enthusiasm, recalling how he loved affection and walks, and his voice sounds light and sincere. A funny comparison to sweet potatoes suddenly comes up in conversation, and the atmosphere becomes almost playful and casual for a moment. Celia thoughtfully applies what she heard to the situation with the nine-tails, trying to draw a strange but logical parallel and make sense of what is happening. She changes the subject by asking about the dog, and her gaze becomes more intent, as if she is checking something important. Upon learning that she herself doesn't have a dog, Celia ends the conversation coldly, as if cutting off a thread that could lead to unnecessary feelings. Knight Enrique accepts Celia's words with relief, trying to hide his awkwardness behind a smile while she remains cold and distant. He cautiously inquires about the reason for her reaction, but receives only an evasive answer, and a slight but noticeable tension hangs between them. Celia, returning her thoughts to the fox, notes that he has again refused to eat, and her gaze becomes heavier with inner turmoil. She admits to herself that she can no longer stand idly by while watching his condition, and decides to intervene despite her doubts. Approaching the cage, Celia declares with determination that she must feed him at least today, as if taking responsibility for someone else's fate. In the silence of the room, Celia stands in front of the cage, watching the fox, and a silence filled with doubt and hidden tension hangs between them. She notices with a slight weariness that the bait does not arouse his interest, and a shadow of disappointment appears in her gaze. The fox watches warily from the cage, not trusting what is happening, and Celia tries to figure out whether he will accept the offered food. Once she's collected, she suggests imagining food as prey, trying to awaken his instincts and push him to take the first step. Celia, a little hesitant, decides to try feeding him by hand, hoping that this will make him show more trust and interest in food. She carefully brings the food closer, offering to at least sniff it, carefully watching his reaction and trying not to scare him away. In response, the fox sharply pushes the treat away, breaking it into pieces, and Celia only silently accepts his outburst of stubbornness. Despite this, she notes his strength and will, realizing that behind his aggression lies a mistrust that has yet to be overcome. Celia picks up the fox, intending to clean him, but he resists fiercely, and her calm clashes with his wild nature. A glint of danger flashes in his gaze, reflecting the tension of the moment, where fear and mistrust mix with instinctive protection. With a sharp shout, Celia tries to stop his resistance, not allowing the situation to get out of control and increasing her pressure. When everything freezes, she remains standing with a cold and firm gaze, realizing that an even more difficult struggle awaits them ahead. The fox suddenly wounds Celia, and blood appears on her clothes, but she maintains her composure, not letting the pain get the better of her. Despite the sharp pain, Celia calmly pulls away and holds him, acting carefully and not losing control of the situation. Later, she calmly treats the wound, remaining collected and cool, as if accepting what happened as an inevitable part of the journey. The enraged man, having received a wound on his face, furiously attacks the fox cub, unable to contain his anger and losing control of himself. His face is distorted with anger, and, overcome with resentment, he vows not to leave what happened unpunished, succumbing to cruelty. The fox cub, wounded and frightened, can barely stand on his paws, his golden eyes full of pain and wariness of the threat. Another blow throws him aside, and his small body falls helplessly onto the cold stone at the feet of his pursuer. Celia, holding the wounded fox in her arms, admits that she was too harsh with him, and a quiet regret appears in her eyes. She strokes him carefully, trying to understand his fear, and with a gentle movement makes him feel that there is no threat near her. Celia comes to the conclusion that people are the cause of his pain, and her expression softens, filling with sympathy and warmth. Looking into his eyes, she understands what he has been through and accepts his fear as a natural defense. With quiet remorse, Celia promises that she will not let him suffer anymore, holding him close in an attempt to give him safety. Celia gently holds the fox by the window and, watching him, makes sure that his condition has improved, allowing herself a sigh of relief. She pulls him closer and, trying to calm him down, patiently shows him a bowl of water, hoping that he will finally trust. A tenderness appears in her gaze as she looks at his small body, and the warmth of her hands gradually relieves the tension. Celia quietly coaxes him to try the water, leaning closer, her voice almost a caring whisper. Finally, the fox takes his first sip carefully, and in this fragile gesture, a subtle trust in her is born. Celia watches with relief as the fox begins to drink, her face lighting up with joy at the first sign of trust in life. A softness appears in her gaze as she thanks fate for this moment. Feeling the tension gradually ease away, she decides that it is already late and carries the food with care, thinking about how best to take care of him further. Watching the sleeping fox, Celia feels a quiet happiness, allowing herself a rare smile amidst the worries she has experienced. She thinks about the future, planning to gradually introduce him to food, realizing that he needs time and patience. In the silence of the kitchen, Celia becomes wary and, sensing something is wrong, quickly leaves what she is doing and heads off to check on the fox. She throws the door open and rushes towards the cage with alarm, feeling the anxiety growing inside her. Seeing the motionless body, Celia jumps up and rushes forward, losing her usual composure. Sitting down next to him, she looks at the fox in panic, trying to understand the reason for what happened and contain her anxiety. The fox lies there, exhausted, breathing heavily and coughing up blood, and the sight makes her heart clench with fear. The weakened fox sits with difficulty in the cage, shaking and trying to come to his senses, his breathing uneven, but there is still a glimmer of life in his eyes. He slowly raises his head, gathering the last of his strength, and watches his surroundings tensely, as if expecting a new threat. Celia holds him close and, bitterly aware of what is happening, takes the blame for his suffering. In her thoughts, there is a recognition that fear and misunderstanding of people made him a victim, doomed to endure pain and loneliness. The fox curls up in the cage again, as if hiding from the world. And in the silence, there remains only the heavy awareness of his fate. A lady in shining clothes stands by the water, immersed in memories, where the image of her mother remains, an unattainable light for her. A warm scene of meeting arises in her imagination, where she is next to her mother, and this feeling fills her with rare peace. The woman's face in the memories is calm and majestic, her gaze radiating softness and hidden strength. The fox, as if connected to this image, reaches out to it, experiencing a strange and warm feeling, similar to longing. But the vision collapses, and reality returns in sharp contrast, leaving behind only emptiness and anxiety. In this dark setting, the thought of the nine-tailed fox's destiny is revealed, and he is faced with a cruel choice of fate. A threat looms over him, and the man uses force without hesitation, causing pain, as if testing his limits. The fox is thrown back by the blow, and a figure with a cold aura appears nearby, intensifying the feeling of hopelessness. Another tormentor watches the creature's suffering with mockery, enjoying the rarity and helplessness of the prey. Write any comment if you watched until this minute. The chained fox trembles in the darkness, his fear and pain becoming a habitual state of existence. Even trying to resist, he only provokes a new outbreak of aggression, remaining a prisoner of someone else's cruelty. In a blaze of rage, the fox breaks free from his tormented state, as if the memories were turning into a destructive nightmare. He rushes through the Phantida's fiery space, overcome with fear and anger, losing control of himself. Celia notices his anxiety and, leaning closer, tries to understand the reason, carefully assessing his condition. The fox comes to, lying exhausted in the cage, and reacts weakly, as if he had just escaped from a terrible dream. Celia watches him with relief, glad that he is alive, although anxiety still remains in her heart. The image of her mother emerges in her memories, and the familiar smell evokes in Celia a quiet nostalgia and aching warmth. She holds the fox gently and, as if talking to him, promises that one day he will be able to share his pain. A determination appears in her gaze as she pulls him closer, promising to protect and punish those who harmed him. Celia cooks by the fire, realizing that she had never understood the importance of simple things and caring. Remembering Eric's words, she decides to act differently, realizing how important it is to take proper care of him. The fox lies calmly on a soft pillow, observing the world around him without the previous tension and fear. Celia says, with a slight smile, that she has come up with a name for the fox, and a warm anticipation appears in her eyes. She takes a step back, about to say it out loud, feeling how the name immediately took up space in her thoughts. The fox looks at her intently, and at that moment, a name filled with special meaning and soft power sounds out. Celia feels the word resonate within her, as if connecting them with an invisible thread. In the memory of his mother, the fox feels warmth and light, as if her voice still guides him through doubts and fear. In the quiet garden, he remembers her touch, filled with care and strength, which helped him not to be afraid of the world. His gaze deepens, as if reflecting his mother's wisdom, which remained with him even after their separation. When he hears a new name, he feels a response in his soul, as if this is how she once called him. By accepting the name, the fox momentarily returns to those days where he was protected and understood without words. And in this silence, for the first time, he feels that the memory of his mother continues to live in him and guide him forward. Rand sits on the pillow warily, feeling the strangeness of what is happening and trying to understand whether this is all a coincidence or a hidden meaning. The girl watches him closely, noticing his detachment and trying to understand the reason for his sudden sadness and mistrust. Rand's gaze becomes colder. He begins to consider the person strange, not understanding her concern and behavior. He ponders why she chose him over others, and how she was able to see something different in him. The girl seems ordinary, but her actions and look make Rand doubt her true nature and intentions. Celia, holding the treat, watches Rand with gentle interest, hoping that she can guess his tastes and preferences. Rand carefully tries what is offered, feeling the unusual taste and not hiding his surprise at what is happening. Celia, leaning on her palms, looks at him with a warm smile, finding his reaction sincere and even a little funny. Ran suddenly becomes captivated by the taste and shows a keen interest in food, showing genuine enjoyment for the first time. Ran eats the treat greedily, gradually losing his wariness, while Celia watches his behavior with quiet satisfaction. He clumsily deals with the food, scattering pieces, and Celia notices how little she knows about his nature and habits. Looking at him, she notes the golden gleam of his eyes and his fluffy tail, becoming increasingly enchanted by his unusual appearance. Overcome by her feelings, Celia hugs Ran, not hiding her tenderness and surprise at how sweet he seems to her. Celia touches Ran gently, her gestures becoming more tender, and he, confused, feels an unusual warmth and loses his vigilance. She looks at him with quiet confidence, as if cementing his name, and Ran feels a strange connection he can't explain. Their gazes meet, and in that moment, a vague tension arises, filled with trust and wariness at the same time. Celia holds him tenderly in her arms, genuinely touched, while Ran gradually gets used to her touch. However, deep down, he still has doubts, trying to understand his feelings and the strange influence this girl has on him. Celia notes that Ran has begun to respond to his name, but his behavior has become more tense and cautious than before. Despite this, she feels relieved because he accepts her care, even if he hides his inner anxiety. A hunch flashes through her mind that the fear of the past still affects Ran, preventing him from trusting completely. The knight who appeared addressed her with respect, interrupting her thoughts and returning her to reality. He notices her condition and wounds, expressing concern and trying to understand what has happened recently. Celia quietly insists that she is fine, hiding her fatigue and trying not to pay attention to her wounds. The knight persistently expresses concern, saying that not only he, but others as well, are worried about her condition. He suggests that she consult a doctor, sincerely believing that she should not ignore her health. Celia calmly brushes it off, calling the wounds minor, although her appearance suggests otherwise. The other knights intervene, apologizing and admitting that they misjudged the situation and are now worried about her. They take responsibility decisively and insist on accompanying her to the treatment center. As they leave, one of them remarks on her unusual calm, as if she were used to enduring pain without showing it. One of the knights stumbles, throwing them off balance and suddenly pulling the others down with him, causing confusion. Celia and they can barely stay on their feet, and the knights' faces are distorted with fear from the unexpected fall. She quickly comes to her senses and asks about his condition in a reserved manner, despite her own weakness and wounds. The knight shyly thanks her for her concern, not expecting such attention from his captain. The tension eases a little, and he expresses his gratitude for her actions with an awkward smile. Celia remains thoughtful and quiet, as if her thoughts are still occupied with something much more important. A woman in dark clothing enters the room, her appearance changing the atmosphere, adding seriousness to what is happening. Shula, without holding back her emotions, sharply accuses Celia, indignant that the nine-tailed fox did all this. She immediately moves on to reproaches, demanding an explanation as to why the captain brought herself to such a state. Celia, despite the pressure, remains calm and tries to brush it off, saying that the wounds are not that important. But Shula does not accept this and insists that everything is serious and Celia is probably in pain, continuing to scold her. Shula, still irritated, asks why Celia didn't come to her for help right away. Coming closer, she examines her and points out the bite marks, warning that even sturdy clothing won't save her if this continues. Irritation turns to anxiety, and Shula abruptly declares that Celia cannot go into battle in this state, otherwise the consequences will be catastrophic. Celia, tired of her pressure, coldly asks her to stop being angry, crossing her arms and maintaining an outward calm. Shula, still grumbling, instructs Celia to go straight to the infirmary after missions next time. She also insists that Celia show the fox, making it clear who is in charge here, and end this confrontation. Celia softly thanks Shula for her concern, her expression becoming calmer and warmer. Shula, a little embarrassed, no longer responded with her previous aggression, briefly and looked away. Celia notes to herself that, despite her harshness, Shula is actually very sweet and genuinely concerned. Shula, having calmed down a bit, clarifies whether Celia has really decided to take up the training of the fox. She immediately asks a practical question. What measures does Celia use to cope with his aggression? Celia admits that after the injury, the fox became noticeably more aggressive and therefore requires special attention. The idea of education through gradual training flashes through her mind. Although this is not easy, Shula asks again in confusion, not fully understanding how exactly one can educate a nine-tailed fox. Celia arrives at a pet store where she is greeted by the saleswoman. She is surprised to see the holy night in such a place, clearly not expecting such a visitor. Celia is a little lost, unable to find the words right away, and looks unusually awkward. The saleswoman quickly takes the initiative and asks how she can help. Celia, embarrassed, asks for shampoo, which confuses her interlocutor even more. After clarification, she hesitantly answers that she needs a remedy for a dog, not entirely sure of her words. The saleswoman offers an exquisite shampoo with a rich rose scent, emphasizing its popularity among aristocrats. Celia immediately refuses, noting that the smell is too strong and will not work. She explains that her pet has a very sensitive sense of smell, and a strong aroma can cause him discomfort. Then the saleswoman offers a softer, unscented option that washes out easily and is gentle on wool. Celia agrees and decides to take this shampoo, finally making her choice. After some time, she already has her purchases and asks to count everything, holding a bag with various goods for the fox. The saleswoman smiles and remarks that Celia loves her pet very much. Seeing the number of purchases, Celia calmly replies that it is not so much love as necessity, remaining reserved. The saleswoman, after thinking for a bit, asks you to wait and decides to give a small gift for a large purchase. She hands Celia extra things, explaining that it's a bonus for buying so much, and Celia thanks her sincerely, softening for a moment and even smiling slightly. As she leaves with the bags, she thinks to herself that the saleswoman is a very good person, and she, in turn, sees her off with a kind message to come back again. Celia returns and calls for Ran, but finds him nowhere to be found. She walks into the room and finds him sitting quietly on the bed. Once she's sure he's there, Celia relaxes a little. She gently asks if he was bored here alone without her. Celia explains to Ran that he tried to leave the house while she was gone and reminds him of the barrier that causes pain. She clarifies that the barrier is specially configured to withstand an escape attempt, which is why it was damaged. While examining him, Celia notes that, fortunately, the wounds are not too serious. However, Ran is still aggressive and bites her hand in response, showing distrust and fear. Celia calmly continues to examine Ran, ignoring the bite, checking to see if he is more seriously injured. Ran is surprised to see that even after his bite, she didn't react in any way. He begins to realize this strange behavior and can't help but admit that she really didn't harm him. Celia looks at him with a slight smile, and Ran again notes to himself that she is a very strange person. Ran remembers how every time he saw Celia, his heart would start to beat strangely. This feeling seemed so unusual to him that he tried to push her away immediately. Despite this, in a short time he has wounded her more than once, leaving new marks on her body. But for some reason, he does not want to hurt her anymore. Celia, not understanding his internal changes, calls his name with alarm. Ran suddenly calms down in her arms, showing trust for the first time. Celia is genuinely happy about this and thanks him, hugging him with a soft smile. Celia gives Ran a stuffed animal so he won't be lonely while she's away. Ran looks at the gift with interest, but his reaction quickly changes. Suddenly, he bites into the toy as if he sees it as an enemy. In a matter of seconds, he tears it to pieces, scattering the filler across the floor. Celia watches this silently, not knowing how to react to such behavior. Celia remarks with a slight smile that she should have bought something edible instead of a toy. Looking at the torn remains, she goes through her purchases and tells Ran that she has already bought everything he needs. A look of concern appears on her face. She senses that something is wrong with him and does not understand his reactions. Deciding to take action, Celia takes the cleanser and says they need to take a bath, but Ran again responds with aggression, growling at her. Celia smiles as she sits Ran down in the bath, puts a cute little cap on him, and tries to distract him by calling him adorable. Ran suddenly begins to kick and splash water, expressing dissatisfaction with what is happening. Despite his resistance, Celia continues to wash him carefully, trying to calm him down and praise him. She understands that there is no other way. If she doesn't wash him, he might get sick, and she gently apologizes for the necessity. Suddenly, Ran breaks free and jumps out of the bathtub with force, splashing water all over the place. Celia, a little tired but calm, asks him to be patient and continues to insist that bathing is necessary. Ran, covered in foam, runs away in panic, trying to escape from the bath. He crashes into the furniture, unable to cope with the movement, and falls with a crash. Celia watches this with concern, her gaze becoming serious and worried. Ran lies on the floor, breathing heavily, still tense and scared. At that moment, the cabinet behind her begins to fall, creating a dangerous situation. Celia suddenly rushes forward, covering Ran with her body and taking the blow on herself. Ran looks at Celia in shock, not understanding why she defended him despite his behavior. Celia, with a soft smile, assures that she is fine, although it is clear from her face that she is in pain. She winces at the pain in her shoulder, but still asks first if Ran is hurt. Ran reacts quietly, his aggression giving way to confusion and caution. Celia carefully takes him in her arms, calming him down and telling him that everything is fine, suggesting that they continue bathing. Celia holds Ran carefully in her arms, softly reassuring him and calling him a good boy. She wraps him in a towel, noticing that he is shivering all over after his swim. Celia smiles tenderly and asks him to calm down, trying not to scare him even more. Turning around, she offers him something to eat, switching his attention to something pleasant. But noticing his gaze, Celia understands that he is worried about her after what happened. In response, she seriously tells Ran that if he accepts his name, he must respect and protect the one who gave it to him. Celia, a little tired, tells Ran not to let go of his man, as if strengthening the bond between them. Ran has a question about his mother, why she called him a man and not an animal. Celia returns with a treat, trying to distract him from his heavy thoughts. She offers him some jerky, hoping he'll like it better. Ran tries, but the reaction is mixed. He doesn't show any obvious interest. The next moment, he suddenly jumps up, as if something had alarmed him or did not suit him. He then walks up to Celia and suddenly bites her leg, revealing his still unstable and wild side. Ran suddenly bites Celia on the leg, but not aggressively, but rather carefully. As if checking, Celia immediately lifts him up and sternly says that biting people is not allowed. Ran sincerely doesn't understand. For him, people are delicious, but hurting them is strange, and he doesn't see a problem with it. Celia suggests that he may not be getting the energy he needs from regular food, which is why he's acting this way. She concludes that he has become calmer after the bath and tries to gently calm him down, hugging him. Deciding to try again, Celia offers him a proper meal, taking him along with her. But as she leaves, she feels pain in her leg from the bite and realizes that she herself needs rest. Celia, overcoming her fatigue, offers Ran to choose the food himself, giving him freedom of decision. She points to the chicken and directly says that it is better to eat it than people, trying to direct his behavior. Ran reacts with confusion and uncertainty, as if he still doesn't fully understand the difference between prey and a person. The unknown man deduces that Ran is a nine-tailed fox with immense strength. He admits that the decision not to kill him in the past was the right one, although there is a cold calculation in his words. The man notes with interest that Ran managed to live for 23 years, which he finds impressive. The man coldly reflects that no matter how hard Ran tries to survive, death still awaits him in the end. He looks at his reflection in the mirror, as if assessing the situation and his next steps. A scene with Celia and Ran appears in the reflection, either as a memory or as an observation of them from the outside. He wonders if Celia is trying her best to protect Ran, since he is still an innocent child. Celia, hugging Ran, feels him especially clearly and wonders if fate has been too cruel to both of them. The white-haired man senses Ran's powerful energy. A huge golden eye appears behind his back, a symbol of his power and observation. The mirror in front of him begins to crack, unable to withstand the pressure of magic, as if reality itself is failing. He suddenly breaks through the magical space, destroying the barrier and coming out. Looking at the aftermath, he notes that the fox cub's strength is indeed unusually great, and wonders if Ran has detected his presence. The woman standing nearby reacts calmly to what is happening, accepting the situation without unnecessary emotions. The man coldly concludes that no matter the circumstances, when Ran grows up, he will still kill him. At the same time, he admits that Celia is raising Ran well and even awakens his bestial nature. He adds that the stronger Ran becomes, the more his power begins to call to him. He knew her life was short, and he spoke about it without embellishment. I even wish that the end would come faster, as if it would be easier that way. But behind the cruel words, there was a different understanding of death. After all, for her, leaving is not disappearance but continuation in a new light. Celia learns that foxes can take on human form and realizes that Ran has already reached that age. But she is worried that she has never seen him as a human being. In her memory, he remains only an animal, albeit one close to her. Celia reminds herself, Ran is a monster and questions his nature. She recalls the legend of the nine-tailed beasts choosing one mate for life, and he understands that one cannot play with such feelings. In the end, Celia realizes that these creatures are too complex and far from the human understanding of friendship. Celia understands that such monsters are rare and live waiting for only one thing, their companion. She is terrified by the thought that he might be left alone or die without ever meeting him. And in this fear, for the first time, she begins to think about what place she occupies in his destiny. Celia confidently says that strength is more important than weakness and advises choosing a worthy companion. She convinces Ran that he too should look for a mate, no matter what. But he reacts in a childish way and doesn't want to be called that. Celia shows a book that says nine-tails have only one companion for life. She explains that it's not just a choice, it's an instinct that can't be ignored. And even if he doesn't understand it now, one day he will definitely meet the one. Celia insists that choosing a partner should be done carefully and wisely. Ran, albeit reluctantly, agrees to look for a strong companion. She adds, otherwise he simply won't succeed. Celia gently offers to help with this choice, taking it upon herself. But Ran doesn't trust her. He is wary of her decision. And yet he remains close by, as if he had already made his choice. Celia receives the guest and calmly conducts the conversation, hiding her true feelings. She says she just wants to check on Rand's condition, but in reality, she is worried about something else. Why he doesn't become human. The guest is surprised that Celia is holding the nine-tailed fox so calmly. Celia replies that he has become obedient around her. And despite the questions, she does not let him go, as if she already considers him her own. Shula warns, Ran is dangerous and remains a monster. No matter how calm he seems, Celia does not give in. She is sure that next to her he will not cause harm. Shula insists that his nature can manifest at any moment, but Celia changes the subject, as if unwilling to acknowledge the threat. Ran feels the tension and looks at Shula with obvious hostility. In the end, Celia takes her away, protecting him, and making it clear whose side she is on. Ran is left alone and openly shows his strength for the first time, but admits that he is weak now and has not yet reached his true level. He understands that if this continues, he will not be able to grow up in time. Ran remembers that he used to not want to grow up, even when he was hated, but now the desire to become stronger becomes almost unbearable. He feels it's connected to Celia, and he understands that her pain is pushing him to grow faster than he should. Ran feels Celia's pain, which she hides from everyone. He is drawn to her more and more. He literally feels her suffering. He decides he needs to grow up faster to protect her. His desire is no longer just an instinct, it is a choice for Celia. Meanwhile, Celia is about to leave, leaving him alone. But he doesn't believe her words and remains on guard, not intending to let her go so easily. Ran realizes that someone else's energy will give him rapid growth. And for the first time, he seriously thinks about crossing the line for the sake of power. Shula feels guilty about what is happening and takes responsibility, but she is surprised by Ran's behavior. He is too calm, and when he calls her closer, there is already a hidden danger in it. Ran pretends to be harmless and even affectionate, hiding his true intentions. Shula notices this but does not feel threatened, taking it for a cute little animal. And it is precisely in this contrast that its danger remains unnoticed. Shula finally loses her guard, considering Ran harmless. She reaches out to him oblivious to the hidden threat. Ran accepts this, remaining outwardly calm, but internally preparing for his move. And at that moment, Celia appears, interrupting the dangerous approach. Shula is confused and does not understand what is happening, feeling a strange state. Celia immediately intervenes, coldly pushing her away and taking control of the situation. She orders her to leave, not allowing her to get close to Ran. For the first time, Celia shows toughness in defending him. Shula notices this change and realizes that it is no longer just a matter of caring. And Celia stays with Ran, finally showing who she has chosen. Celia sets a strict line. If Ran harms a person, she will kill him herself. Ran accepts this rule calmly, as if he was already prepared for such an outcome. Celia reveals the truth. Shula is not an ordinary person and understands more than he seems. She tells Ran that she doesn't want him to suffer from pain and hunger anymore. But Ran sees a different meaning in this, a world where you either have to kill or be killed, and asks the main question, does Celia really want their connection to become like this? Ran holds back and retreats, choosing not to cause harm. Celia stops him gently, but there is a stern prohibition in her voice. She hugs him protectively, and at the same time, to keep him from making a mistake. At this moment, Ran understands. For her sake, he must change. He accepts her request to no longer harm the innocent. Celia searches for Ran, but finds him in an unexpectedly playful mood. He behaves like a normal animal, offering to play. Celia gives in and watches him with a slight smile. In the game, he appears carefree, not at all like a dangerous creature. And she understands. He combines different sides, a predator and someone who just wants to be around. After what happened, Celia becomes more cautious, and their relationship noticeably strains. She tries to control Ran by offering him regular food instead of people. Ran refuses, showing that his nature is stronger than simple solutions. And between them, the conflict becomes increasingly clear. Care versus his true essence. Celia tries to calmly feed Ran, keeping the situation under control. But his instincts take over. He suddenly breaks away, the cage falls, chaos ensues, and the prey escapes. Celia is left confused, not understanding his reaction, and it becomes clear. His nature cannot be contained so easily. Celia tries to figure out who is to blame for the mess, but already suspects Rana. He responds with aggression, not hiding his irritation and his nature. The situation gets out of control, turning into chaos. And for the first time, Celia seriously wonders whether this is all a game for him or not. Celia is annoyed. She put in the effort, and Ran ruined it all. She directly calls his behavior a problem and sets a strict condition. Ran is stubborn and refuses to obey, not accepting her rules. A conflict erupts between them, control versus his freedom. And in the end, Celia deprives him of food, demanding an apology, showing that she will not give in. Ran has been refusing to eat for several days now, and this is starting to worry Celia. Shula insists he won't starve to death, but his condition still seems strange. Celia notices that he has become lethargic, which was not the case before. She tries to find an explanation, even suggesting that it is his condition and not his body, and it becomes clear. The problem is not only hunger, he is depressed and deprived of his usual environment. Celia understands that Ran lacks freedom, and this is breaking his condition. She decides to push the boundaries, even at the risk of using force. Shula warns that this could increase pain and have consequences, but Celia doesn't back down because she can't leave him to suffer, and her choice is clear. She's willing to take the risk for Ran's sake. Celia gently offers to talk, sensing his state, but Ran refuses, withdrawing into himself and not letting her get closer. Celia sighed after all the preparations. Celia decides to start the conversation herself, despite his coldness. She tries to get closer, touching him softly and speaking to him. Ran is still stubborn and avoids her, not wanting to open up. But Celia doesn't give up, continuing to speak to him warmly and calmly. And gradually, he does react, albeit weakly, but no longer pushes her away completely. Celia starts the conversation carefully, trying to get through to him. She asks only to look at her, making it clear that she does not want a quarrel. Ran is stubborn, but he doesn't push her away as harshly as before. Celia asks for just one chance, speaking sincerely and softly, and finally admits that she just wants to make peace. Celia admits her mistake and understands how hard it was for him. She sincerely wants to make amends and explains her feelings. As a sign of reconciliation, she gives him a special gift. At first, Ran doesn't understand, but he begins to listen, and Celia gives him the most important thing, freedom, allowing him to return to the forest. Celia notices that Ran does not immediately accept her gift of freedom. She explains that it is better than keeping him locked up and gives him the choice to run, hunt, and live the way he wants. Celia understands that normal food is not suitable for him and tries to adapt to his nature. She prepares suitable prey for him so that he can eat without harming people. But Ran reacts dissatisfiedly, showing that this is still not enough. Celia lets Ran go, giving him the opportunity to decide for himself and return. She hopes that her concern and choice will still reach him. Ran returns, but remains distant and cold. He avoids intimacy, not accepting play and warmth. And Celia understands. He needs time. He is still not ready to open his heart. Celia read in silence, but her thoughts slipped away like the light in the room. Hearing footsteps, she turned around, and her heart trembled from the unexpected meeting with Ran. Ran froze warily, his gaze still searching for support. Celia led him gently outside, filling her steps with light and calm. In the shadow of the trees, she gave him freedom, hiding her excitement behind lightness. He still came back closer, as if an invisible thread was pulling him back. A hint of doubt flashed in his gaze, warm and almost trusting. And even when he was far away, he didn't really run away, but remained close. A quiet confusion flickered in his gaze, as if he didn't know what he wanted. Even when he was free, he did not go far, remaining within the confines of her world. Celia noticed that he didn't need freedom, but something much closer and warmer. Celia clutched the book in her hand, her gaze filled with a worried glimmer of suspicion. Ran ran freely across the grass, as if he was rediscovering the world. He still looked back at her, not wanting to lose this connection. A question about his past, full of hidden secrets, arose in her thoughts. A majestic power shone in her image, like the light of an ancient sun. But behind this radiance lurked the shadow of loss that left Ran alone. And the past, shrouded in darkness, held the answers to his fate and birth. Memories depicted Rana as withdrawn, wary, hidden behind bars of fear. Celia thought, feeling his pain linger from the distant past. A sudden guess flashed in her gaze, breaking the fragile calm. Celia watched as Ran darted across the grass, truly coming to life for the first time. A soft smile, full of quiet approval, appeared in her gaze. Ran returned with his spoils, beaming with pride and wild natural grace, and Celia realized that his strength demanded freedom, not restraint. Celia quietly accepted the idea that Ran's happiness was more important than his true form. The fox, bathed in light and flowers, looked truly free for the first time, but a sudden pain gripped her, reminding her of the price of the decisions she had made. Through the tears, dark shadows of the past emerged, full of cruel voices. Shadows of the past surfaced like a cruel echo, filling the heart with fear and pain. Celia clutched the wound, feeling a burning flame consuming her from the inside. The news of the monster broke the silence, causing everything around to tense up. Her gaze grew heavier as the attacks became more and more merciless. The resolve grew stronger when it became clear that the borders were no longer safe. Celia coldly clarified the location of the threat, instantly making the decision to act. A hint of weariness flashed in her gaze, but the order to move was given without hesitation. The anxiety intensified. The symptoms seemed alien, the danger lurked deeper. Celia squeezed the pain, keeping herself on the edge, not allowing weakness to take over. Through the agony, she clung to duty, to the meaning of her existence. And amidst the chaos of thoughts, there was only one thing left: to protect Ran at any cost. A mysterious stone appeared before her, emitting a cold, unsettling glow, and Celia realized its power, a barrier fueled by ancient divine energy. The state of the barrier was alarming. It became clear that it had begun to collapse during the night. The message about the imminent collapse increased the tension because the protection could disappear at any moment. A proposal arose to interrogate the saint in order to understand the reason for what was happening. However, this idea was sharply rejected, since the saint was considered the embodiment of divine will. The uncertainty of what was happening gave rise to fear and confusion in the face of the impending threat. He stepped forward with a heavy heart, suppressing his anxiety and doubts. The world was shaken by waves of monsters, whose fury was rapidly growing with each passing day. The impending catastrophe required the intervention of the Empire's strongest defenders. Celia, the acknowledged leader of the Holy Knights, bore the weight of responsibility for eradicating the threat. A wave of monsters has swept across the Western continent, destroying the established order. Only those with holy power could withstand the impending disaster. But at the crucial moment, the Holy Kingdom itself found itself on the brink of collapse. Tensions flared instantly as the accusation was delivered harshly and without mercy. The saint's anger burst forth, mixed with resentment and wounded pride. In response, cold restraint only deepened the rift, turning the dispute into an open confrontation. The accusation became direct and harsh. The blame for what happened was placed without hesitation. The elder tried to intervene, but the tension had already gotten out of control. The revelation about the barrier stone was made, hinting at the hidden cause of the disaster. The truth turned out to be painful. What was happening was linked to contempt for him. His desperation burst forth, revealing a thirst for recognition and power. The response was a cold denial, leaving the conflict unresolved. The accusations became harsher, and the guilt of concealing the truth weighed heavily. In a fit of rage, he issued a harsh sentence, depriving them of freedom and power. The guards complied without hesitation, adding to the atmosphere of cold oppression. Despair turned into a scream. His pride was trampled before his eyes. The attempt at intervention was drowned in tension, giving way to hidden knowledge. His words sounded like a challenge to the system, revealing the truth about the nature of the disaster. The old man in shining clothes froze in alarm, sensing impending disaster. The condemned man was led away, and the cold of power chilled his steps and glances. The captain accepted what was happening without argument, hiding the weight of the decision inside. The flashing light revealed the highest truth, where the divine will was intertwined with the destiny of people. Through the radiance, an image of power is revealed, uniting mercy and the principle of punishment. The fate of the chosen one attracts the attention of the deity, like a spark in the darkness. Even marked with signs, he remains alien to the holy canons and expectations. A cold gaze captures the truth where the scales of fate are tilted against him. The elder in the shadow of the temple decides to take a secret step, hiding his true intentions. He orders to act discreetly, understanding the danger of the plan being revealed. His gaze is full of anxiety, because the consequences could get out of control. In silence, forces emerge that are not subject to ordinary laws and orders. Even the highest being, in his opinion, needs not judgment, but protection and care. The faith of the people is based on the image of the saint, who has become a symbol of protection and support. His significance has been elevated to the level of the foundation on which the entire continent rests. The destinies of people are intertwined with its existence, determining their salvation or death. The awareness of the threat pushes one to search for the true chosen one, capable of changing the course of the future. The night comes out to a bloody clearing, where the shadow of a recent battle still hangs in the air. A sharp scream pierces the silence, causing her to turn around warily. The soldiers surround the source of the sound in confusion, not understanding what is happening. Before them appears a child, overcome with fear and despair. A disturbing truth about a monster in human form emerges. The plea for mercy sounds too human, destroying confidence in the correctness of the choice. Doubt grips the hearts of warriors, destroying their former confidence in duty. The captain stands before the child, torn between command and compassion. A frightened voice cuts through the darkness, begging for salvation and leaving everyone hesitant. The decision is made coldly, and the order is given without a shadow of doubt. The shadow of death still hovers nearby, reminding us of the price of the choice made. The silence of the room softly envelops her, as if hiding her from worries and pain. The look warms when the small creature breathes peacefully nearby. The gentle touch brings a strange, almost forgotten relief. For the first time in a long time, the heart releases its heaviness and becomes lighter. In this tranquility, a quiet joy and a barely noticeable smile are born. Warm tenderness spreads through the touch, as if the truth is hidden deeper than the lines. Behind the soft beauty hides something attractive and dangerously alive. Someone else's closeness becomes a sweet shadow that steals strength along with breath. But in this moment, there remains only quiet joy, light, and carefree. The cozy silence is filled with soft tenderness, and the world seems almost safe. The golden gaze flashes. There is trust in it that touches deeper than words. A sudden movement shatters the peace, as if hidden wildness makes itself known. A slight confusion flashes through my thoughts. Anxiety creeps up unnoticed. A sharp pain tears apart the moment, reminding us that the fragile calm is deceptive. The remaining pain melts away, giving way to a soft, almost caring warmth. Calm returns slowly, like a quiet promise of serenity. His presence fills the space with light and a strange inner comfort. A light touch at the feet evokes timid hope and tender embarrassment. The golden gaze meets hers, and a silent question arises between them. A mystery hangs in the silence, capable of changing everything familiar beyond recognition. The thought clings to the lines of the past, in which an unspoken truth is hidden. His gaze is calm, but in the depths, something stubbornly silent flickers. A light sound breaks the pause, leaving behind a thread of bewilderment. The cautious movement betrays curiosity mixed with quiet uncertainty. The golden glow of his eyes seems to hide the answer, which he is in no hurry to reveal. The warmth of her hands takes away doubts, leaving only a soft, sleepy calm. A sharp cry breaks the peace, bursting into the silence with alarming persistence. The haste in his voice carries fear, as if trouble is already gathering behind the door. The gaze becomes colder, gathering thoughts into tense anticipation. The news falls hard, like a blow, instantly breaking the previous balance. Misunderstanding flares up, but anxiety turns out to be stronger than confusion. Awareness comes quietly, leaving behind an anxious, lingering trace. The resolution sounds calm, but there is still a latent tension simmering in the air. The appearance of a guest brings with it a cold politeness and a subtle tinge of understatement. The space between them fills with caution, as if every step is a test. Politeness disguises intentions, and a look reveals much more than words. The anxiety is growing. A premonition of disaster is slowly growing in every moment. The secret unfolds slowly, as if light were penetrating a thick curtain of silence. The gaze freezes, catching an anxious premonition hidden in someone else's gestures. The bright feather shines as if it holds ancient power and dangerous hope. The decision hangs heavy, changing fate and pointing the inevitable path. Doubt slides across the face, leaving a shadow of fatigue and anxious guess. The world seems too quiet, as if hiding the answer in the rustling of leaves. Someone else's confidence sounds cold, like an inevitable sentence of fate. Determination clenches in a fist, turning into a desperate need to act. Cold logic forms a strict pattern, where the truth is hidden behind the thin line of guesswork. The plan sounds harsh, like a test capable of burning away doubts along with a person. The thought flashes suddenly, alarmingly illuminating the path to a frightening discovery. In the silence of the hall, a question arises, full of caution and hidden mistrust. Moldes's gaze is cold, but deep down, there lurks the certainty of an inevitable choice. The secret of the relic is revealed softly, like a light that can burn everything around. Celia bows her head, feeling the weight of duty and someone else's trust on her shoulders. The decision sounds calm, but behind it lies a dangerous path full of trials. The image flares with a soft light, revealing a secret connection between power and the mark of fate. The test is clearly outlined, as if the fire is already reaching out to test someone else's soul. Words fall heavily, like a warning where the price of a mistake is life itself. Thought burns with cold, painting the fate of those who will not withstand the test. Caution becomes a shield, because behind the secret, an invisible threat already lurks. The farewell sounds soft, but it hides the coldness of anticipation and the inevitable outcome. Thoughts become confused with anxiety as the world outside the windows slowly loses its balance. Doubts weigh more heavily, turning the task into a burden from which there is no escape. Fatigue slides down my hand, but my mind still clings to duty. Danger is gathering in the forest, quietly growing to the edges where there is no longer any protection. The realization comes coldly, like a sentence in which the future threat is inevitable. The silence of the forest suddenly crackles with anxiety, as if nature itself is holding its breath. A threat thickens in the shadows, where animal silhouettes become the embodiment of fury. Realization comes instantly, breaking the peace with a cry of impending danger. The movements slow down. Each breath is careful, like a step along the edge of an abyss. And in this chaos, a strange feeling is born, as if something is wrong here. In the heart of the thicket, a tiny life trembles, doomed to the cruel judgment of its own kind. Determination flares up like a spark, cutting through fear and doubt with the cold steel of will. The sky opens to meet the leap, where strength and fury merge in one blow. The blade cuts through the air, reflecting the cold light of determination and ruthless clarity. The silence after the fight seems false, as if the forest has not yet said its last word. The gaze slides over the bodies, and a strange doubt is born in it, which does not fit into the usual truth. Instincts whisper of a hidden threat, as if an invisible shadow still watches from the depths of the forest. In the silent forest, a quiet, almost impossible feeling of purity breaks through the pain and fear. Confusion thickens, as if the air becomes heavier with an unresolved choice. The thought of mercy flares with a soft light, breaking the usual order of cruel decisions. The gaze fills with doubt, where duty first collides with a barely noticeable warmth. The small figure reaches out for protection, as if seeking salvation in someone else's, but only hope. A request is born in trembling eyes, so sincere that it is impossible to ignore. Amazement pierces the moment when the impossible breaks the boundaries of the familiar world. Anger flares up sharply, but immediately fades under the weight of a cold, imperious calm. Destiny hangs on the edge, where the awakened mind still hesitates between light and darkness. Within the young soul, light and darkness collide, intertwining in the fragile balance of future choice. The shadow beckons with cold, promising strength, but in its depths lurks an irrevocable loss. Through tears, determination is born, naive, but surprisingly pure and stubborn. The pain of loss flares up brighter than any fear, turning into a quiet cry full of despair. Hope, barely alive, clings to words as if to a light that can keep the heart from going out. In the dense silence of the forest, a promise is born, warm and unexpectedly sincere, like a ray of light among the shadows. Childish faith sounds bold, naively intertwined with the hope of being accepted in a strange world. Awkwardness slips in a moment where severity gives way to quiet human warmth. Decision descends softly, like a touch, taking fragile life under protection and on a new path. There is a protest in the alarm, but it is drowned out by a firm determination that leaves no room for doubt. The past emerges as a soft echo, breaking down the boundaries of fear and habitual prejudices. Doubt clings to the mind, but is met with a cold, unyielding refusal. Truth is revealed quietly, where beast and man merge into one meaningful existence. Amid the rustling of the leaves, a question arises, full of doubt. As if the world is not ready to accept such a rarity, the answer sounds calm and firm, like a promise in which there is no longer room for hesitation. The new home opens up with a quiet light, where fear gives way to cautious trust. Unfamiliarity dissolves into soft familiarity, and in that moment, a connection is born. Awakening fills the gaze with warmth, where care becomes as natural as breathing. Celia brings a new child into the house and calmly announces that he will now live nearby. Rand sees a reflection of herself in him and is lost between surprise and disbelief. The thought of a werewolf evokes fear and internal resistance. Celia gently tries to diffuse the tension and encourage acceptance, but Rand sharply rejects the idea, not ready for such a change. A sudden fear flares up and breaks the thin thread of trust. Rage meets rage, entwining itself into a painful knot. A wild fight blurs the lines between defense and attack. Chaos overwhelms and feelings are drowned in the storm. A sudden intervention breaks the course of events. Behind the silence, there remains a bitter trace of misunderstanding. Celia stops the outburst of aggression and harshly analyzes what happened, not allowing the attack to be justified by fear. She explains that werewolves have a tendency towards rage in their blood, but that doesn't absolve them of responsibility. Gradually, the tension subsides, and instead of fear, an awareness of one's mistake appears. The boy remembers his mother's words about controlling his strength and admits that he must learn to restrain himself. Celia supports him, reminding him of his mother and her kindness, strengthening his faith in the best. Eventually, guilt gives way to determination, and a desire arises to become stronger, not for the sake of strength, but for the sake of good. Celia teaches that power without constant training quickly gets out of control and leads to loss of sanity. She emphasizes that everything now depends on him and gently guides him to make a choice, to become better by taking responsibility for himself. Inspiration flares up, and within him is born the determination to become better through hard work and perseverance. Curiosity replaces fear, opening the way to simple questions and trust. Innocence is revealed in the recognition of one's own youth and vulnerability. The werewolf world is revealed. Rapid growth and short childhood. Understanding connects destinies, showing their equality despite differences. Thoughts become confused as childhood fragility strangely coexists with premature maturity. Doubt quietly grows, reminding how much path still lies ahead and how early the burden of choice falls. Awkwardness gives way to a storm of fuss, where care turns into chaotic tenderness. Little paws and tongues destroy order, leaving only laughter and confusion. Fatigue lies like a soft shadow after the sudden chaos. Behind the reproach lies genuine affection and a search for warmth. Caring is shown in simple things care, food, and affection. And in this, a quiet feeling of home and acceptance is born. Ease collides with rules, where freedom gives way to the need to grow up. Care is transferred imperceptibly, linking them with a shared responsibility. The house resounds with warm life, filled with soft sounds and trust. And gradually, alongside this warmth, a new spark of change is born. Celia senses a threat and immediately sends the children away, taking control of the situation. She becomes wary of the alien presence and goes out to meet the unknown. A familiar figure appears before her, a guard whose sudden arrival causes tension. He behaves calmly, but hides the important reason for his visit. A cautious conversation begins between them, filled with distrust and restraint. Celia hesitates to speak here and suggests moving inside. She is worried about the safety of Ran and Bee, because the conversation clearly does not promise anything simple. Celia begins the conversation about the mission with tension, hiding her anxiety behind an outward calm. The thought of failure weighs on her, leaving a silent cry and doubt inside. A sudden noise breaks your concentration, causing you to abruptly end the conversation. She immediately jumps to the defense, hiding the true cause of her anxiety. The guardian senses something is wrong, but is met with a cold wall of denial. Celia tries to regain control by awkwardly retreating into formalities. Behind the outward order lies the truth. The mission has reached a dead end and time is running out. The conversation devolves into cautious guesses about where the truth is hidden behind the shadow of orphans and omissions. Cold logic displaces emotions, turning the search into a calculated test. Thoughts slide towards doubts, where duty collides with fatigue and internal protest. An unexpected demand upsets the balance, leaving an unsettling trace of inevitability. The awareness of the deadline burns, like a quiet threat of separation and loss. Tensions mount when disobedience is questioned. A determination is born within, to hide the feelings and complete the journey no matter what. The tension breaks down in a simple request, behind which fatigue and weakness are hidden. An internal breakdown does not allow one to accept help. Pride is broken through force. He is left alone with the pain, hiding it behind quiet stubbornness and trembling determination. Anxiety flares suddenly, causing Celia to rush forward through fear and doubt. Moldes's weakness shows through full mask, revealing fragility and hidden pain. An awkward silence weighs down, leaving behind only a heavy feeling of bewilderment. Celia's thoughts become confused, and her gaze fills with anxious confusion. The call breaks through the tension, returning attention to what is happening. A soft creature appears nearby, breaking the gloomy atmosphere. A new mystery thickens in the air, hinting at invisible connections and hidden answers. Moldes's cold order sounds sharp, she breaking the tense silence of the room. Celia barely has time to react before alarm flashes in her eyes. A flash of rage erupts and Bee lunges forward, losing control. Celia immediately intervenes, holding the blow and defending despite the risk. Moldes, in a reserved but firm manner, demands explanations, not accepting softness. The tension thickens around the differences, the innocence of a puppy and the danger of power. Celia gathers her thoughts, preparing to reveal the truth behind what is happening. Celia calmly reveals the truth, recalling the battle and the strange encounter among the ruins. Her memory flashes back to the moment of their first meeting, where fear mixed with an inexplicable connection. Moldes cuts off abruptly, not accepting the emotions and clinging to cold logic. Celia remains firm, not retreating from her feeling and inner response. Doubt thickens in the room, where the mind argues with what cannot be explained. Moldes acknowledges the oddity, allowing himself for the first time to doubt the obvious. The idea of connecting with monsters sounds like a dangerous truth that could change everything. Doubt hangs in the air, where Moldes's words sound like a hidden test of the boundaries of what is permissible. Celia is lost in thought, feeling the weight of her choice and the responsibility for the consequences. Logic collides with the fact that not all darkness brings evil, and this destroys the usual foundations. A resolve grows within Celia, ready to take a blow for the sake of her choice. Her clenched fists betray the tension where the fear of punishment gives way to inner truth. In the warm light, Moldes's confession sounds like a quiet acceptance of inevitable guilt. Celia does not back down, holding on to her decision despite the mounting pressure. In response, a compromise emerges, where strictness gives way to cautious concession. The condition lies like a heavy promise, tying freedom with a thin thread of duty. Silence seals the deal, leaving hidden anxiety and uncertainty behind the words. Celia stands, hiding the pain, while the heaviness inside slowly tears her apart from the inside. Shula notices something is wrong and hurries closer, alarm flashing in her eyes. Tension builds as she searches for signs of injury, finding no apparent cause. Celia weakens but holds on, as if not wanting to show vulnerability. Questions multiply, fear intensifies, because the wound is not visible, but the pain is real. The truth breaks through quietly. The source of suffering is hidden deeper than can be seen. Shula realizes the gravity, realizing that behind it lies something ancient and dangerous. Celia holds on with all her might, hiding her pain and fatigue under a mask of fortitude. Shula is nearby, attentive and anxious, trying to help and make her path easier. There is a quiet determination between them, to finish what they started and not back down. The tension subsides only on the surface, but inside Celia the darkness is growing ever deeper. Thoughts are confused, the body gives up, and hope hangs on a fragile will. The awareness of danger comes late, strength is almost exhausted. Celia falls, taking with her fear and determination to reach the end. Anxiety flares when an ominous mark appears on Celia's shoulder, inspiring fear and disgust. Panic grows, her body shakes with pain, and those around her already see in her the birth of a monster. Darkness spreads across the skin as if alive, saturating its essence with cold power. Desperate hope clings to salvation, holy water as a last chance to stop the curse. The icy abyss closes in, the weight of the water presses on Celia's body, and the darkness swallows up the last of her strength, leaving only dull fear and a silent scream. Consciousness fades, and through the cold and pain, Celia reaches out to the thought of how much longer she must endure this slow fading. Inside Celia, everything is torn apart by unbearable pain, tears dissolve in water, and only a desperate desire to escape from this excruciating emptiness remains. Through the downpour and the scarlet glow of the barrier, the world is torn apart, and the motionless Celia drowns in weakness, while alarm flares outside. The boy's despair beats against the barrier, fear and panic burst out. But between them, there is only a cold wall and the impossibility of reaching out. Tears burn his eyes, screams are lost in the roar of power, and in every movement, there is a desperate attempt to save Celia at any cost. Celia struggles to her feet, hiding her pain behind a fragile calm, as if convincing herself that she is still capable of taking a step. Everything inside her aches and contracts, and in the midst of this silence, only one desire is born: for this pain to finally let go. Anxiety fills the air, confusion overwhelms, and in the chaos, a desperate search for an answer breaks out that doesn't exist. Strength is fading, breathing is ragged, fear squeezes the heart, leaving only a painful feeling of one's own helplessness. Celia struggles to return to reality, her vision blurring and her consciousness clinging to fragments of what is happening, unable to comprehend. A strange presence emerges through the rain, strong and frighteningly calm, sheltering Celia from the destructive world. There is a cold confidence and quiet power in his gaze, as if the storm itself retreats before this unshakable force. A light touch stops the chaos, and in this moment, a silent command sounds: to freeze and no longer resist. Through the rain and flickering light, Ran appears, carrying Celia through the chaos, as if reality itself bows to her salvation. Ran's warm presence envelops Celia, dulling the pain and fear, leaving only a shaky sense of peace amidst the raging elements. Relief flares behind the barrier. Anxiety gives way to timid hope when the gaze finally finds living movement. The tension eases, confirmation pierces the air, and in that moment, fear recedes, giving way to fragile faith. Rand's cold determination sounds without hesitation, cutting off unnecessary feelings, and there is only one way left: to leave and never look back. The cold silence of the room is broken by a rush, and Ran, hiding her anxiety, focuses only on saving Celia. His gaze grows heavier, his voice becomes firmer, as if reality itself is submitting to his unyielding will. He leans closer, sensing her weakness, and realizes that delay could be too costly. Celia trembles, cringing in pain, and her body betrays her condition, leaving her no strength to resist. A disturbing recognition flashes through Rand's mind, and his insides tighten with the knowledge that he has felt this before. The scent of Celia's pain becomes unbearably clear, permeating Rand's consciousness and leaving behind a heavy, oppressive feeling. Rand stops abruptly, sensing a hidden threat, and there is a cautiousness in his movements, as if any touch could worsen Celia's condition. In the tense silence comes the realization that this is not just a wound, but something darker and more destructive, penetrating deeper. Celia, overcoming her weakness, senses danger, and anxiety rises inside her from the realization that touching could cause even more pain. Rand's thoughts come together, and he discerns in this trace not a curse, but something else, much more complex and dangerous. Celia's pain grows, losing control, and every movement gives a sharp response, as if her body is resisting life itself. A cold clarity arises in his mind, and the strangeness of what is happening no longer seems random, but leads to a hidden reason. Realization pierces Rana, leaving a heavy question about the nature of a force that cannot be explained by conventional laws. Weakness washes over Celia. Her strength is slipping away, and even her breathing becomes heavy, as if life itself is slowly leaving her body. Rand notices the dark mark, and an alarming thought pierces her consciousness. It doesn't just hurt, but gradually consumes Celia from the inside. The realization comes cold and merciless. If this isn't stopped, Celia's time is rapidly running out, leaving no hope. Rand's resolve strengthens. He understands the difficulty of the task, but retreat is impossible when her life is at stake. In this silence, there is only one thing left to do. Do everything possible now, even if the path ahead is full of pain and uncertainty. Rand leans closer, and a soft glow flares between him and Celia, as if the energy itself is responding to his determination. The warm light penetrates deeper, intertwining with his breath, and an invisible force begins to slowly draw the pain outward. Celia suddenly comes to her senses. The air burns her chest, and her body painfully reminds her of what she experienced, not allowing her to forget a single moment. The pain still squeezes her from within. Her breathing is ragged, and every movement is an effort, as if she is learning to live again. Rand's calm presence is felt nearby, and his confidence gradually displaces anxiety, preventing fear from returning. He acts calmly and precisely, creating a sense of security around Celia, where chaos can no longer reach. The silence fills with a soft warmth, and Rand's words lie like a heavy but reliable support, restoring a sense of security. Celia looks at him, feeling a strange attraction and a vague memory, as if something inside had already responded to his presence. Confusion and curiosity are mixed in her gaze, and in the midst of this, a question quietly arises that has no answer yet. Celia catches Rand's gaze, and a feeling of awkwardness rises in her chest, mixed with slight embarrassment and an incomprehensible warmth. She tries to deflect the conversation, hiding her confusion, while the strange excitement inside her still rages on. Thoughts cling to change, and Celia suddenly notices how much Rand has grown, as if time has imperceptibly changed him. There is a hint of confidence in his smile, and behind his calm, there is a hidden strength that is hard to ignore. The words sound almost casual, but there is a soft play behind them that makes Celia even more embarrassed. She hides her gaze, trying to regain her usual balance, but a new, still unclear feeling is already growing inside her. The conversation flows calmly, but a strange presence slips into it, leaving behind a slight feeling of strangeness and incompleteness. Celia refuses to eat, listening to herself, and a quiet anxiety grows inside that is difficult to explain in words. The discomfort intensifies, the body seems to react to something invisible, and this sensation becomes more and more alarming. Rand watches carefully, picking up on the slightest changes, his calm concealing the growing tension. Celia's words make the space seem to freeze, and the air becomes heavy with the realization of something inevitable. The truth reveals itself slowly and coldly, connecting her state with something inside her that can no longer be ignored. A desperate resistance flares up in Celia, fear and anger intertwining, forcing her to cling to the only chance to get rid of the alien power. Rand remains unyielding, his cold determination sounding like a sentence that leaves no room for doubt or retreat. A tension arises between them, where truth collides with despair, and every choice carries inevitable consequences. Celia grows weaker, her voice loses confidence, and her body increasingly betrays her, submitting to the growing pain. Ran concentrates, casting aside the unnecessary, and directs all his attention to her condition, as if searching for the only true path. Celia listens to herself, and the sudden realization makes her breath catch, revealing the source of the pain deeper than she expected. A sharp response flares up in the silence of the room, and the presence of strangers only emphasizes that it is no longer possible to hide what is happening. Shula's question breaks into the silence, and tension instantly fills the space, making Celia wary. Her suggestion sounds abrupt and unexpected, leaving Celia confused by a frightening and absurd thought. Shula tries to figure it out, clinging to logic, but every detail only increases the strangeness of what is happening. Her actions show persistence, a desire to get to the bottom of the truth and confirm or refute the guess. Celia maintains an outward calm, but inside, confusion is growing as the situation spirals out of her control. Even Celia's denial fails to convince Shula, and a heavy sense of anxiety and unspoken truth remains in the air. A sudden realization flashes through Celia, and anger overwhelms her, forcing her to see betrayal and someone else's will in what is happening. The thought of Rana pierces the mind, and indignation bursts out, leaving no room for doubt or justification. Shula finds herself caught in the middle of a surge of emotion, unable to react before the tension between them reaches its breaking point. Celia pulls herself together, and a cold clarity appears in her determination. It is no longer possible to hide the truth. Anxiety about the consequences flares up inside, and the thought of who might have noticed everything becomes a new cause for concern. A heavy silence falls over the room, and Celia's gaze is met with an unexpected presence that only adds to the awkwardness of the moment. The idea of pregnancy sounds almost ridiculous, but it provokes a violent, almost naive reaction from Eric, full of shock and confusion. Unable to bear the tension, he rushes up from his place, seized by a sudden determination to check everything, not listening to calls. Celia reaches out to stop him, but the situation is already getting out of control, leaving only confusion in its wake. Celia hides her face in her hands, trying to calm the tension that has washed over her, but inside, she is still seething from what happened. Shula, despite her embarrassment, is genuinely worried, trying to support and find at least something encouraging in the situation. Celia's outright denial is firm, shattering the awkward assumption and bringing the conversation back to reality. Shula is at a loss as she tries to understand the truth, and her confusion is replaced by a sincere desire to understand what is happening. Celia avoids answering, hiding the real reason, and her words sound too simple for the depth that lies within. Shula's question is cautious, but it contains a deep doubt that makes Celia return to recent events again. The thought of Rana does not give her peace, and behind the external calm, there is anxiety that his true nature may be different. His human form comes to mind, and this contradiction only increases the confusion and prevents us from finding a clear answer. Details begin to fall into place, and even small things like clothing and food take on a new, disturbing significance. Despite her doubts, a warm feeling remains in Celia's heart, as Rand's behavior does not pose a threat, but seems sincere. The outcome remains uncertain, and between fear and trust, a quiet conviction is born that he is still who he was. Shula's words sound cautious, and there is a hidden fear in them that intimacy with Rand could turn into danger. She tries to find a rational explanation, clinging to the facts, but doubt does not allow her to completely calm down. Tensions rise, and Shula demands answers, as the unknown becomes more difficult to bear than any truth. Celia responds coldly and reservedly, as if time and experience have already lost their former meaning for her. Her words convey confidence that Rand's fate is sealed, and that sooner or later he will return to where he belongs. But deep down, a shadow of doubt remains, because even Celia herself admits the thought that he might choose a different path. The conversation ends there, leaving behind a quiet sense of unease and a sense of inevitable change. Shula doesn't let go of the topic, and there's an insistence in her voice, as if the truth is slipping right through her fingers. Celia freezes as the words about Rand's feelings touch her, leaving a quiet, unfamiliar excitement inside. Shula carefully develops her thought, and her observations come together to form a clear picture of hidden attachment. Memories flash before my eyes, where Rand's care no longer seems random, but is filled with new meaning. These words cut deeper into Celia's heart than she expected, causing her to look at his actions and intimacy differently. But Shula remains firm, believing that his path still leads back to where his past and duty lie. Her reasoning echoes the conviction that he is only a temporary guest here, limited by circumstances. And even when she doubts it, she is inclined to think that nothing will change, leaving Celia alone with new feelings. Shula raises the question carefully, her words sounding doubtful, as if she is trying to push Celia towards the truth she is avoiding. Without waiting for an answer, she draws her own conclusion. And in this gesture, one can sense a slight disappointment and weariness from uncertainty. The conversation ends, and Shula leaves quickly, leaving behind only silence and a feeling of incompleteness. Celia is left alone with her thoughts, and doubt slowly grows, forcing her to search within herself for the reason for what is happening. An image of Ran emerges in her mind, deprived of freedom and the familiar world, as if his existence here itself is a mistake. The thought of the future hurts, and a fear of an inevitable separation arises, for which she is not ready. Finding no answer, Celia remains at a loss, feeling a sense of unease building within her about what lies ahead. An unexpected discovery interrupts Celia's train of thought, and her gaze takes on a wary look of something left unexplained. Curiosity mixes with anxiety when she finds a letter that seems to have been intended specifically for her. The words in it are cold and direct, revealing a hidden purpose and a hint of a power she doesn't yet fully understand. The realization weighs heavily because there is something greater behind it: destinies, decisions, and inevitable consequences. Returning to her usual place, Celia feels doubt, not knowing how to accept and explain what she heard. The sudden appearance of familiar creatures breaks the tension, bringing her back to reality and knocking her out of her heavy thoughts. Their reaction is full of energy and simplicity, but there is a hint of reproach hidden within it, as if Celia was the cause of all the recent events. Celia cautiously broaches the subject, testing the limits of her abilities, but quickly realizes that Rand's powers are far from what they once were. The recognition of limitations sounds calm, without reproach, as if it had already been accepted as an inevitable reality. She is distracted by the children, allowing herself a rare moment of warmth, where care displaces worries and doubts. The thought of separation recedes, giving way to the decision to postpone difficult conversations until a calmer time. There is a softness in her words, a desire to preserve this short period of carefree happiness for them. And in the midst of this silence, hope is born that now they can be a family, even if only for a short time. Rapon bursts in with irritation, her words sounding sharp, as if she no longer intends to tolerate other people's decisions. Her indignation grows, turning into a direct accusation, where every phrase is imbued with discontent and misunderstanding. She presses him with questions, trying to get an answer, but is met only with cold silence from Moldus. The tension thickens, and in this silence one senses not weakness, but a hidden depth that is difficult to read. Finally, the question sounds direct, and it is no longer anger, but a demand to understand the reason behind his actions. Moldus starts from afar, asking a question that sounds strange, but it contains a test of an important guess. At first, Rapon doesn't pay attention, answering calmly, because something like this seems impossible within the usual laws of the world. She explains this as a natural order where the boundaries between entities are strictly separated and cannot cross. Her words convey a confidence based on knowledge that such a phenomenon simply has no right to exist. But Moldus does not back down, pointing out the contradiction that destroys this logical picture. The tension mounts, and his words no longer sound like theory, but like a statement that demands recognition. The ending breaks the silence. He saw it himself, and now doubts turn into an alarming reality. Rapon sharply rejects what she heard, considering Moldus' words madness, because they destroy everything she believed in. But Moldus remains calm, and there is no doubt in his confidence, as if he had long ago accepted this truth. He insists on his own, claiming that he saw the spirit beast with his own eyes and cannot be mistaken. Mistrust collides with confidence, and tension arises between them, where the truth becomes ever closer. Moldus goes into detail, explaining that he recognized the creature's nature immediately, without hesitation or doubt. His words resonate, because even someone else's confirmation involuntarily creates an alarming picture. Ultimately, there is only one thing left to do: admit that what is happening is beyond the ordinary, and it can no longer be ignored. Rapon elaborates, and her words take on a tenacity as if she were trying to grasp at any clue that might lead to the truth. Moldus cannot confirm this, and his answer sounds reserved, leaving room for doubt between them. The question hangs in the air, demanding proof, because without it, even the most convincing guess remains just an assumption. Then he gives a new clue, revealing the knight's identity, and the conversation begins to take on more concrete outlines. Rapin recalls details, and a logic emerges in her words that connects past events with current doubts. The realization comes gradually. The lack of reaction to the pen even then seemed strange and out of step with the usual rules. Celia makes a conclusion, and the picture becomes frighteningly clear. If this is true, the consequences could be deadly. Moldus picks up the idea, and his reasoning strengthens the suspicions, putting everything together into a single chain. Rapin's resolve flares instantly, and doubts give way to action, for now retreat is impossible. She chooses the path forward, ready to personally verify the truth, even if it leads to a dangerous encounter. Rapin's determination drives her forward, but her path is suddenly interrupted by a strange presence, forcing her to stop mid-step. Moldus is nearby, trying to keep the situation under control, but the tension only increases from the sudden meeting. There is a sense of awkwardness in the air as everyone realizes they have collided at the worst possible time. Iris's appearance instantly changes the atmosphere, filling the space with cold power and hidden pressure. The formalities sound clear, but behind them one can sense caution and careful observation of every movement. Iris's question cuts through the silence, and his gaze makes it clear that what is happening will not go unexplained. Moldus leans forward in confession, and his words sound like an excuse, but there is already a shadow of impending guilt in them. Iris responds coldly, reminding him of the ban, and the calmness of his voice only increases the gravity of what is happening. The attempt to explain sounds sincere, but it comes up against a harsh reality where personal motives do not matter. The question of who is to blame hangs in the air, and the silence becomes louder than any excuses. Moldus lowers his gaze, accepting the consequences. And in this silence, one can read a readiness to bear punishment. The order comes without hesitation, cutting everything off, and the tension instantly reaches its limit. A sudden outburst of reaction breaks the silence, and the situation spirals out of control, turning into an open confrontation. The blow comes suddenly, breaking the last vestiges of order, and Iris's power manifests itself in a brutal, ruthless force. Moldus rushes towards Rapin, and in his movements there is fear and a desperate attempt to protect, despite the inevitability. Iris doesn't hide her superiority. His words sound mocking, as if what is happening is just a logical outcome for him. He reminds Rapin of her duty, turning her into a symbol rather than a person, depriving her of the right to weakness and choice. Moldus can't take it anymore, his voice breaking through the fear, defending her past and sacrifices that cannot be devalued. The answer is a cold demand, and there is no doubt about this order. Only authority that does not allow objections. Iris delivers her sentence coldly, and in her words, there is no doubt or pity, only power and the desire to break resistance. His decision is born instantly, turning punishment into a well-thought-out plan where the fates of others are just a tool. He deprives Rapin of the right to her former strength, cutting off any possibility of unification and leaving her vulnerable to the future. The pressure increases, and behind the outward calm lurks a threat. Her position can be easily replaced. The order is final, sending her to the front lines where every step will be a test of survival. The outcome is harsh and clear. Her duty is to take the blow, even if the cost is unbearable. The air is thick with tension, and any desperate attempt to object is drowned out by the cold determination to obey the order. Celia rushes forward, accepting her imposed fate, as if rushing towards an inevitable blow. Ran watches this with an icy grin, turning someone else's submission into an excuse for a humiliating lesson. A new question hangs in the silence, a dark shadow reminding of the escaped guard and the hidden threat. The answer sounds muffled and alarming, leaving the feeling that danger is still lurking very close. The name Julius has a heavy ring to it, and behind it lies a shadow of doubt, in which loyalty has already cracked. The decision appears merciful only on the surface, hiding a cold calculation and deferred punishment. A burst of rage tears through the silence as betrayal is perceived as a challenge to divine authority itself. In a maddened certainty, a threat is born, where fear becomes a tool and consequences an inevitable storm. And over all this hangs a mad audacity that challenges even the gods, as if boundaries no longer exist. Julius emerges from the silence, as if crossing an invisible boundary, and his gaze reveals the calm confidence of his arrival. A noisy world opens up before him, filled with movement, strange faces, and the unfamiliar, vibrant bustle of the East. Awareness comes gently but inevitably. This is a different continent, where everything breathes differently and hides new secrets. The tranquility of the garden is broken by a sudden movement, and Celia rises lazily, meeting a familiar presence. The animal's joy spreads across the greenery, but behind this lightness lies a feeling that everything had already been decided. Celia's gaze sharpens, and in the silence, a question arises, pointing to a secret path and an uninvited guest. Celia takes off, leaving her anxiety behind, and there is a sense of haste in her movements, dictated by an inner turmoil. Thoughts get confused, forming a guess, where the name of Moldus sounds like a key to a hidden danger. The tension mounts, and the silence is broken by a sharp cry, as if the darkness itself were responding to her footsteps. Celia's gaze freezes, filling with an unexpected, recognizable fear, where reality seems too close. In a short exhalation, a question is born, and in it, confusion, as if the meeting destroys all previous expectations. Rippon hides behind an outward calm, but in her movements, one can feel the tension, as if every thought is given with effort. She explains her visit by the haste and disturbing news, where the shadow of invasion has already disrupted the usual order. Celia picks up on the details, and the name Rippon emerges with new meaning, casting doubt on the stability of the entire system. Anxiety emerges behind the reasoning when attention switches to the state of Rippon, in which hidden pain is felt. The conversation is cut short by a soft determination, and Celia takes the initiative, trying to quickly get to the heart of what is happening. The words about calm sound too strange, and disbelief at such unexpected calm flashes in Celia's eyes. Rippon gently but firmly leads the conversation further, testing whether Celia understands the true nature of Moldus's power. His role as a guide through case the one who sees what is hidden from others comes to mind. This thought only increases anxiety, because even the silence he predicted seems not a promise but a harbinger. Suddenly, the conversation changes direction, and Rippon's request sounds almost mundane, but there is a different meaning behind it. Celia responds with restraint, not allowing herself to retreat from her duty, despite the strangeness of the proposal. But the persistence does not disappear, turning into an attempt to draw her into a trip where everything seems suspiciously convenient. In the end, only a refusal remains, firm and cautious, as if intuition is already warning of a hidden danger. Rippon suddenly softens, and her confession sounds almost sincere, coloring the tension with a warm but strange tint. Celia responds with restraint, as if fencing herself off from these words, not allowing them to shake her inner wariness. There is an awkwardness in the silence, where Rippon seeks a response, but is met only with cold distance. The attempt to put pressure results in mild irritation, as Celia remains unwavering in her decision. Rippon's name sounds like a reminder of her role, bringing the conversation back to seriousness and hidden confrontation. Anticipation turns to disappointment when Celia makes it clear that she will not give in to persuasion. The ending cements her choice, and behind her calm words, one senses a firm determination to stay and fulfill her duty. Celia is ready to end the conversation, but the tension does not let up, as if something has not yet been said to the end. Rippon suddenly jumps up, clinging to her with a desperate plea that betrays the fear of being left alone. The words are confused, but in them one can sense a sincere desire to keep her close, to find at least some kind of justification. She clings to the worry about monsters, turning the threat into an excuse to keep Celia from leaving. Celia remains calm, but in her silence there is a doubt, subtle and almost imperceptible. The question about Moldus sounds like a key that reveals the omissions and hidden motives of what is happening. Rippon, as if switching gears, diverts the conversation, trying to hold attention through naive warmth and simple imagery. Celia's gaze lingers on Rippon, and there's a strange feeling in it, as if there's something else hidden behind her softness. The thought of this creeps in with alarm, because her behavior suggests not just persistence, but a predatory game. Celia is distracted, returning to calm, allowing Ran and Bio to greet the unexpected guests without tension. But a sudden realization pierces the silence as Rapon senses a familiar energy, shattering the illusion of serenity. The truth is revealed gradually, revealing the nature of the nine-tailed foxes and their long-accumulated power. And among this knowledge, one frightening understanding stands out. This fox is still young, but his potential already goes beyond the norm. The last thought sounds alarming and weighty, hinting that his power may be much more dangerous than it seems. Celia holds her breath, listening to the subtlest response of the fox's power, and feels how the usual boundaries of her perception begin to imperceptibly blur. The thought of her own oversensitivity troubles her, like a hint of a hidden truth that she is not yet able to accept. Rapon, having gathered his courage, awkwardly tries to close the distance, hiding his inner turmoil behind outward politeness and gentleness. Celia maintains a cool reserve, but as she sees her off, she can no longer shake the feeling that what is happening is beyond the ordinary. Rapon suddenly breaks the distance, offering the impossible with childish directness, causing Celia to freeze in unexpected and internal turmoil. Embarrassment flooded Rapon's cheeks, but there was still a stubborn sincerity in her gaze that did not allow her to retreat. She justifies her behavior with the habits of the order, but between the lines, one can sense a desire to get closer, hidden behind naive logic. Celia remains cold and stern, bringing the conversation back into line, as if trying to restore order. Rapon, oblivious to boundaries, continues to watch and tease, as if playing with her restraint and hidden tension. Celia, maintaining her dignity, gently moves away, hiding behind her calm a slight awkwardness and inner confusion. Rapon, without relenting, again reaches closer, and her behavior becomes too personal, going beyond the limits of what is acceptable. Rapon, carried away, crosses the line of what is permitted. But at that moment, Ran appears nearby, instantly changing the atmosphere to tense and cold. Rapon is confused and embarrassed, realizing the awkwardness of the situation, but it's too late. Ran's gaze becomes sharp and dangerous. Ran intercepts her movement, suppressing the initiative, and in his gestures there is a hidden threat that does not allow for objections. His focus narrows to a single target, causing Rapon to freeze under the pressure, like prey before a predator. Fear of Ran's true nature flares in her mind, and for the first time she clearly senses it as something far more dangerous. Ran demands an answer, leaving no room for retreat, his presence oppressive and sapping the will. Celia intervenes, breaking the tension, preventing the situation from getting out of control and completely destroying the fragile balance. Rapon, carried away, with childish delight, notices the fox's ears, not hiding his sincere surprise and lively curiosity. The sudden movement of the beast throws her off balance, turning delight into confusion and slight fear. Celia calmly takes over the situation, holding the fox and gently but firmly setting boundaries for how to handle him. Celia gently guides the fox away, returning his calm, as if trying to maintain a fragile balance after the recent tension. Rapon comes to life again, collecting her thoughts, and her gaze fills with cautious hope and hidden excitement. Celia politely but firmly refuses to get closer, maintaining her distance and hiding her inner wariness behind it. Leaving everything behind, she walks away with a quiet relief, as if closing the door not only on the room, but also on unnecessary feelings. Rapon, embarrassed and flustered, admits her mistake, trying to hide her awkwardness behind timid sincerity. She accepts Celia's words, but deep down there remains a slight confusion, as if her feelings have not yet found peace. Left alone, she allows herself to relax, immersing herself in a rare moment of silence and carefreeness. In the warm water, her thoughts become freer. Emotions that she had suppressed for so long emerge. She begins to doubt, feeling that the truth is slipping away, and the usual answers no longer seem convincing. The internal conflict intensifies, because even those close to her cannot give her confidence in what is right. Under the night sky, the realization dawns. Everything turned out to be much more complicated than she could have imagined. The nights drag on, and Rapon returns to Celia again and again, hiding behind this a growing obsession. In the silence, she creeps up, wavering between determination and doubt, as if she herself is afraid of her intentions. The thought of attack is born as a dangerous temptation, tinged with fear and a strange attraction. Her mind searches for justification, simplifying the impossible and dulling the anxiety of what she is about to do. But once she's close, she freezes, not daring to cross the line, leaving only a quiet attempt to touch. At the crucial moment, everything collapses when the fox suddenly intervenes, destroying the fragile plan and raising the alarm. The attempt fails completely, leaving behind only confusion, tension, and the bitter realization of failure. A light, almost playful idea flares up like a spark in the morning tenderness, hiding behind it a daring intention and inner passion. A sudden collision with reality derails the plan, turning it into a storm of confusion, pain, and uncontrollable chaos. Stubbornness does not allow retreat, and a new attempt is born through awkwardness mixed with anxiety and growing tension. But even support and brief relief do not save. A series of failures only further swirls the whirlwind of feelings and failures. The fourth attempt erupts in a chaotic impulse, but absurdity and chance again destroy everything, leaving only traces of disorder and frustration. The realization of defeat washes over me like a heavy wave, in which fatigue, resentment, and a stubborn unwillingness to give up are mixed. The gaze clings to the source of all failures, and irritation flares up brighter than before, fueling the internal conflict. Doubts are replaced by a new, almost desperate idea, where determination borders on recklessness and a thin hope of success. In the disturbing light of the meeting, Celia senses Rapun's hidden pain, behind which she hides her fatigue and the battle she has experienced. Tensions rise as Celia's concern clashes with Rapun's stubbornness, which refuses to admit her own weakness. A quiet conflict brews between them, where anxiety, duty, and stubbornness intertwine into a heavy silence. Celia, hiding her pain behind stubborn calm, justifies her silence with the fear of weakening the squad and disrupting the difficult operation. Rapon flares with anxious indignation, because behind her sternness hides fear for Celia and the pain of her selflessness. Tension hangs between them. Celia calls the fight a lesson, and Rapon cannot accept such a dangerous sacrifice. Celia speaks of duty with a quiet pain in her eyes, putting the protection of the kingdom above herself, even if it hurts her the most. Rapon flares up, rejecting these words, because for her, Celia is not a shield, but someone who must be protected at any cost. The tension thickens as Celia gently reverses the meaning, as if accepting the role of protection but remaining in the shadows. And yet, fatigue takes over. Exhaustion hides behind the calm, leaving a heavy, anxious silence after the conversation. Through the pain and blood, a bitter realization breaks through. The fall of one can bring down everything for which she fought and lived. Other people's words emerge in her memory, where care hid mistrust, leaving behind only a heavy shadow of doubt. But a stubborn protest is born inside. Fragility is just an illusion, behind which lies a strength that does not want to be anyone's protection. The screams are drowned out by the crimson darkness, where fear and despair tear through the space, demanding protection that no one else can give. In the merciless darkness, shadows stretch, clinging to the body, while consciousness drowns in the chaos of pain and horror. Rage flares through the tears, turning weakness into a cold, desperate acceptance of the inevitable. Memory is torn apart by flashes of torment, where countless wounds and fangs of monsters turn the body into a field of endless battle. In the cold silence, a cruel truth rings out. Even an unshakable shield cannot protect from the pain that penetrates deeper than any wound. The shadow of someone else's will thickens, offering to forge strength from suffering, turning torment into a perverted test. A sudden call breaks the tension, tearing you out of your dark thoughts and bringing you back to reality. Anxiety flares in the eyes of loved ones when the familiar world begins to crack under the weight of what is happening. And at that moment, it becomes clear. Behind the external calm lies something frightening and inexplicable. Rapon bursts into the silence, overcome with fear as the weakness hidden behind someone else's former strength is revealed to her. Helplessness weighs on her because even with her loved ones, she cannot immediately understand what exactly is destroying Celia from within. The awareness of the wound flares up like an alarming spark, causing the heart to clench with sudden guess. The desire to help is met with prohibition, and this only increases internal conflict and anxiety. Rapon does not back down, allowing concern to prevail over doubts, even if it violates boundaries. Alarm burns in her eyes, because behind the external resistance, she senses something much more dangerous. Ripon freezes as Celia, barely holding herself together, whispers about feigned calm, hiding the brokenness and weakness behind the words. In an attempt to protect her from the truth, Ripon seems to turn a blind eye to the danger, clinging to the illusion of control. The gaze of outsiders is filled with anxiety, because what is happening goes beyond the ordinary and is frightening with its unknown. A sudden distortion of energy shatters the silence, and Ripon feels something alien seeping through the familiar world. The realization comes with cold horror. A dark force, belonging neither to man nor to light, is bursting out of Celia. Celia decides to act, suppressing her trembling, and reaches out for salvation, as if grasping a thin thread of light. A sharp pain flares up in Rapon's body. The wound pulsates with darkness, as if hiding an alien force within itself. The room explodes with alarm. Chaos thickens around, and everything collapses under the weight of the growing threat. Celia, clenching her will, suppresses her fear and controls the situation, hiding the storm behind an outward calm. But the truth trembles in her eyes. The night drags on endlessly, and hope hangs on the edge, almost fading. Celia, pale and haggard, lies in the cold light, her golden hair scattered across the pillow, her shoulder scarred by a sinister wound, as if left by the darkness itself. Ripon, a fragile white-haired girl with scarlet eyes, leans over Celia carefully, supporting her gently, as if afraid of causing more pain. Ripon studies the wound with alarm, sensing an alien, frightening force within it. A shudder runs through her, as if an invisible threat is gliding close by. The fox becomes alert, sensing the same darkness. But Ripon accepts the scar without turning away from the pain. There is a quiet desire to protect Celia burning in her determination. An alien aura trembles within the dark drop, causing pain and enticing one to reveal its nature. Celia lies pale, clutching weakness as worry flickers quietly across her gaze. The memory flashes. Darkness bursts from the wound, as if a curse clinging to life. She stubbornly hides her pain, avoiding help so as not to reveal her vulnerability. Celia is wary, trying to grasp the truth in the fragments of what is said. But the answer eludes her. Silence holds the secret as Celia remains between sleep and pain. Celia is tossing and turning in delirium. Her body aches and the pain presses down, as if leaving her with neither strength nor hope. Thoughts rush away. The desire to escape flares up desperately, like a cry from the very depths of the soul. She falls into darkness, shattering against her own powerlessness, as if the world around her is cracking along with her. An emptiness grows in my chest. No warmth, no support, only the cold of loneliness and fatigue. But at the last moment, the thought of her loved ones stops her, preventing her from completely disappearing. Bai, a boy with a confused look, holds a white fox, feeling his own weakness and lack of strength. Ran looks at him sternly and wisely, as if urging him not to give up. Ran doubts, but stubbornness and a desire to become stronger awaken within him. He reaches for the chair, accepting the lesson. Power cannot be waited for, it must be earned. The movements are awkward, but they already give rise to a determination to overcome oneself. Under the fox's gaze, B gathers himself and prepares to act, despite his fear. Ran sits nearby, listening to Bio, and his gaze is a mixture of worry and surprise. Bio decides to become human to understand people's feelings. Ran senses the gravity of the choice and the hidden power behind these words. A determination is born in his heart to become stronger and never lose loved ones again. Ran looks into Bio's golden gaze, and for the first time clearly senses the truth of his words. Behind them lies not just a decision, but a firm, mature will. Ran is acutely aware of the truth. This body has strength, but no freedom. Fragility becomes apparent. Even a simple action seems unattainable, and this knowledge weighs heavily on his heart. In the silence of the room, anxiety gathers around the weakened Celia, while Ran and Bio stand frozen in helpless anticipation. A storm is brewing outside, as strict rules collide with a desperate determination to break in at any cost. Shula, with a blazing gaze and trembling rage, casts aside her doubts, feeling how fear for Celia overshadows everything. A harsh shout destroys order, and the tension cracks like glass under the pressure of emotions. The door swings open, letting in a whirlwind of determination where duty gives way to personal anxiety. A moment of confusion gives way to horror when your gaze falls on something wrong. The devastated room becomes a silent cry of distress, where every detail speaks of an impending catastrophe. Shula rushes inside in confusion, clutching the worry as if it had already become reality. The air thickens with foreboding, and even the footsteps sound alien in the empty hall. Rand becomes wary, his gaze sharp, as if he senses a hidden threat. Anxiety turns to panic when silence provides no answers and everything seems wrong. Shula's thoughts become confused. Fear tightens her chest, raising the specter of the worst outcome. At this moment, hope collides with despair, and the heart freezes on the verge of breakdown. A desperate plea flashes in Bio's eyes as fear for Celia breaks through his fragile composure. Shula winces, shocked by the sudden plea and the gravity of what is happening. Irritation flashes in her gaze, behind which lies anxiety and fatigue from other people's secrets. Celia lies quietly, as if cut off from the world, and tension hovers over her motionless body. Silence becomes an admission of guilt, difficult and unbearable for everyone around. Shula coldly cuts off unnecessary words, trying to maintain clarity amidst the chaos. But even through the severity, uneasiness breaks through when a strange alien change is felt in Celia. Celia, pale and exhausted, clings to the last of her strength, trying to convey the truth through pain and weakness. Shula, holding back her emotions, immerses herself in her work, as if cold water could wash away disturbing thoughts. There is a flicker of doubt in her gaze, because the words sound too heavy for a simple wound. Celia trembles, acknowledging the pain that permeates not only her body, but her very soul. Shula softens as she notices the change, and her anxiety gives way to cautious relief. A touch of irony brings breath back into the scene, as if the tension in the hearts were momentarily released. Celia, gathering her remaining strength, reaches out to Shula, and in this gesture there trembles gratitude mixed with pain. Shula jokes softly, hiding her concern and weariness in her lightness, as if trying to ease the heaviness of the moment. She promises to stay close, making the decision not as a duty, but as a quiet inner desire. The words about children echo with warm sadness, reminding us of the fragile bonds that hold them all together. Celia obediently closes her eyes, trusting, although anxiety still lingers in her heart. Shula smiles through the tension, sensing that there is something deeper behind the calm. Gratitude hangs in the air, warm and sincere, like light breaking through fatigue. A quiet light fills the room where Shula remains next to Celia, maintaining a fragile peace and a barely perceptible hope. A shadow of doubt flickers in her gaze, as if something disturbing and unsolved is hidden behind the external calm. Celia, hiding her weariness behind cold determination, stands up again as if duty is stronger than pain. A conversation unfolds before her, where anxiety is disguised as strict necessity. The knight hands over the medicine, and his gesture conveys genuine haste and hope. The decision is made quickly, as if time is compressed and leaves no room for doubt. But in the silence, there is a strange feeling of emptiness, as if something disturbing is hidden behind Celia's appearance. Enrique's voice is even, but there is anxiety in it, because Celia's body seems frighteningly empty and devoid of strength. Celia turns away, as if remembering something heavy, and her steps carry not confidence, but the stubborn resistance of weakness. Celia leaves with forced calm, as if hiding her anxiety under the armor of duty. Her weakness comes to mind, and the silence becomes heavier than any scream. Thoughts gnaw at me, because the secret has been revealed, and fate is pulling me ever closer to the abyss. The determination to move forward collides with the cold knowledge of the impending verdict. Celia's thoughts darken, and they already sound like a verdict, as if her fate had long been decided. The awareness of the curse sinks into the consciousness, turning the future into a chain of inevitable death. Before her inner eye, an execution flashes, where flames erase her existence without mercy. But a sudden call breaks through the darkness, causing the heart to tremble and return to reality. The shadow of the past haunts Celia, where the names of the guardians sound like an echo of fate and an unsettling sentence. The appearance of a new warrior with a cold gaze increases the tension, hinting at an even more dangerous turn. Ripon rushes towards Celia, catching her in her weakness. An alarm flashes in her gaze brighter than the sunset light. My heart sinks with fear for her, because her pallor seems like a shadow of hidden pain. The interruption of a strange voice breaks the moment, giving the proceedings a cold wariness. Rapun's slight insolence is met with intense mockery, deepening the atmosphere of mistrust. The uninvited interlocutor seems to be playing with words, trying to offend and sow doubt. There is a hidden threat between them, disguised as politeness and strange hints. Rapun holds firm, but deep down, there is a growing feeling that something far more dangerous is behind this. Celia's gaze dims with worry as hasty decisions begin to have inevitable consequences. Rapun leads her away, as if saving her from an approaching storm, where every word becomes heavy with meaning. The remaining figures freeze in tension, sensing that the conversation will only exacerbate the hidden contradictions. Subtle hints float through the air, turning a simple remark into a poignant test of feelings. Doubt creeps into his voice, as if cold calculation is hidden behind the friendliness, and the silence between them becomes heavier than words, revealing the depth of what is unsaid. The image of Harish emerges as a dark legend, where power and contempt for people are intertwined into a cold silhouette. His gaze burns with insolence, rejecting even the will of a saint as if fate were just an empty phrase for him. Tensions flare between him and Moldus, where duty clashes with stubborn freedom. Their conversation sounds like a clash of principles, revealing hidden motives and old grievances. Behind the promises of help, a different calculation emerges, causing one to doubt their true intentions. And the threat that escaped Harish's lips becomes a cold harbinger of impending cruelty. Harish maintains an icy calm, hiding behind it a predatory curiosity about Celia and her strange power. Moldus's thoughts flow cautiously, trying to unravel the reason for this unexpected restraint. Harish's gaze betrays that he has already drawn conclusions, sensing someone else's trust in Celia as something suspicious. The words catch on, turning into a game where observation becomes almost mockery. A light irony glides between them, but underneath it lies wariness and hidden interest. Harish, without admitting it, seeks confirmation that everything is going according to his internal plan. And in the tense silence, the truth emerges. He is perceived not as an ally, but as a dangerous beast. Moldus's words reveal the truth, where Harish's coldness is born from a deep hostility towards people. Celia's name sounds unexpectedly soft to him, as if a strange interest were flaring up amidst his indifference. Celia's image merges with warmth and light, causing an unusual attraction in him. The fox instantly senses the threat, his rage flaring up, protecting his mistress from prying eyes. Harish notices the beast with curiosity, seeing it not as a danger, but as a rare creature. His desire to get closer only increases the tension, turning the meeting into a dangerous game. And in this interest, the true goal is revealed. Not Celia, but the mysterious power of the nine-tailed fox. Celia appears reserved and wary, as if she senses a hidden threat in the unexpected visit. Harish easily approaches the fox, and his interest is not softened by a hint of dangerous curiosity, but by a dangerous one. Moldus takes control of the conversation, dressing the purpose of the visit in politeness that conceals the seriousness of his intentions. Behind the calm words, alarming news emerges, hinting at changes that could change destinies. The history of the Order is revealed by a shining symbol, where the power of the saints is intertwined with the destinies of the guardians. Moldus delves into the past, explaining how the higher will determine the leader and the order of power. The image of Aeolus appears as the embodiment of the ideal, but behind the glitter, there is already a crack hidden. Harish abruptly destroys this legend by reporting the escape, breaking the solemnity of the story. The reasons emerge gloomily, hinting at doubts even in the sacred truth. Moldus tries to soften the blow, revealing details of the disappearance with careful heaviness. And at the end, an unexpected proposal is made, which is met with an immediate and cold refusal. Tension flares in the room when the offer sounds too hard to accept. Moldus insists, revealing Celia's past achievements as if laying out irrefutable evidence. He increases the pressure, reminding her of her strength and exploits, leaving no room for doubt. The proposal is softened, but remains serious, framed by hints about the hidden risks of power. Outside the room, there is a sense of chaos, where the lack of a leader is already tearing apart the order of the kingdom. Celia is lost in doubt, not understanding why the choice fell on her. And finally, the truth emerges. She is seen as not just a person, but a bearer of a rare and dangerous power. The offer sparkles with hope, promising protection and a new home, like a light through the anxiety. In the silence, doubt creeps in about the price of the power hidden in Rana's fragile body. The name Harisha sounds like a key that opens the way to salvation and growth. Celia leans forward in thought, accepting the weight of the decision with quiet determination. The answer is firm. Protecting loved ones is more important than any outside help. Ripon bursts into joy, filling the room with warmth and genuine relief. But behind this light, a new thread of events is already stretching, changing their destinies. The news hits them suddenly, and the air between Enrique and Celia is filled with tense amazement. Enrique lights up with genuine delight, seeing in her the strength that is finally recognized by the world. Celia, however, takes it calmly, hiding her embarrassment behind quiet fortitude and her usual restraint. Enrique's joy sparkles purely and brightly, like a child's faith in her strength and the correctness of her choice. Celia quietly lowers her gaze, surprised by the warmth she had not expected at all. A noise of sincere feelings flares up behind the door, and for the first time her heart responds to someone else's affection. Celia is left alone with the weight of a new role, where doubt slowly displaces the recent light. The idea of power seems alien, as if fate had placed a crown on her without her consent. In the silence of the night, Repon appears, gently breaking her loneliness. Celia recognizes the strangeness of what is happening, feeling like everything is changing too quickly. Repon calmly destroys illusions, reminding her of the fragility of her position among others. And in the cold light of the night, it becomes clear. This peak is not nearly as stable as it seems. Under the starry sky, the tension melts, and only a quiet, awkward understanding remains between them. The question of permission sounds sharp, revealing doubts that Celia does not have time to hide. Ripon gently steers the conversation, hiding the truth behind a touch of mockery and calm. It reveals Enrique's character, where sincerity borders on dangerous, naive faith. There is a certainty in her words. Convincing him will be too easy. And in the end, it all comes down to the essence. It is not power that is important, but the protection of those who are in a higher position. Celia recalls the former power of the order, but she cuts off the past, leaving only a cold reality. Ripon sharply reveals the truth, where fear and indifference are hidden behind holiness. Celia freezes, taking the blow, unable to find words in response. The thought of hatred permeates the silence, revealing hidden cracks in faith. Her resolve grows stronger. For Rand's sake, she is ready to accept even someone else's help. But inside there still lives a sense of unease, as if the path ahead leads to something much more dangerous. Celia raises the sensitive topic with caution, as if afraid of destroying the fragile trust between them. The question about the curse sounds heavy, revealing her inner fear and uncertainty. Ripon answers calmly, but there is a cautious understanding of what she saw in her voice. The truth emerges darkly. The mark on the body is something much more dangerous than it seems. Memories of other people's fates rush through us like cold, hinting at the inevitable price. And somewhere in the past, a cruel laugh sounds, foreshadowing what her fate may become. The memory rips through the silence, returning to the day when fear and pain fell upon an innocent child. Screams, blood, and panic merge into chaos, where guilt already seeks its victim. A look distorted with horror accuses, turning Celia's name into a sentence. Through the cold of the rain, she carries this burden, as if she herself becomes a shadow of her past. The recognition falls quietly but heavily. Her power has already caused pain to others. Ripon clings to meaning, trying to understand the boundaries of this darkness. But Celia's words only reveal a deeper tragedy, where guilt and duty are intertwined. Celia carefully reveals the truth, where the troubles around her look like shadows of her curse. Ripon flares with alarm, suddenly confronted with the frightening meaning of these words. The truth changes. The blame lies not with her, but with those who distorted her fate. The realization comes suddenly. Evil was turning against those who wished her harm. The thought of Rana flashes with an alarming guess, causing the heart to squeeze. But the conversation ends, leaving behind only a growing sense of impending truth. Celia breaks into a run, as if catching up with the elusive truth that was burning inside her. In the silence of the night, the meeting with Harish becomes inevitable, like the answer she was heading towards. His calmness only increases the tension, confirming her most alarming suspicions. A picture of pain flashes before my eyes, where the mark becomes a source of chaos around. And the truth finally collapses. Her fate is intertwined with a force that resembles both a curse and a miracle at the same time. Doubt begins to boil within him, and his faith in the justice of heaven cracks, giving way to a bitter challenge to fate. The image of holiness disintegrates in scarlet flashes, revealing the truth about someone else's impunity and the stolen right to be called the chosen one. An uneasy silence thickens, and the question of the will of the gods hangs in the air, chilling the mind and depriving one of support. The lady stands in the cold light of the night, and Harish feels how her hatred of God sounds like a condemnation of all previous faith. Harish freezes, and Rapan seems to sense the change when Celia's name sounds soft for the first time, without its usual harshness. The lady clasps her hands, and even Repon notices how behind her calmness there is a stubborn attempt not to accept her own truth. The lady lowers her gaze, and her confession sounds almost inaudible, as if she is afraid of destroying the fragile truth of her own feelings. Repon watches from the side, sensing in her words not doubt, but a quiet desire to see the light in another soul. The night sky opens up above them, and even Harish feels her faith take on a strange, stubborn form of hope. Harish freezes when his name sounds different, as if for the first time he is seen not as a threat, but as a living person. In this warm scene, even Rapan feels how something soft, almost elusive, but real is born between them. The news comes suddenly, and Darren's confidence is shattered, leaving behind only a sharp sense of injustice. In his anger, Darren clings to the old order, as if without it, the world loses meaning and stability. Moldus remains calm. His words sound cold and precise, like a predetermined sentence. Doreen's attempt to prove his strength is shattered by Moldus's dry denial, increasing the internal tension. There is a hint of recognition in Moldus's voice, but behind it, there is a line that Darren is not allowed to cross. The words fall heavily, revealing a weakness in Duran that he himself is not ready to accept. And in this silence, there remains only the bitter realization that Moldus's truth hurts more than any blow. Doreen freezes in the stranger's closeness when Moldus's words reveal hidden feelings that he had not dared to think about. Moldus steps back with cold clarity, reminding that everything that is happening is just a temporary illusion, not worth trusting. Doreen involuntarily tenses, hearing Moldus compare Julius's strength to a withering flower, predicting its inevitable end. Before his eyes appears the image of a tireless warrior whose life is wasted in an endless struggle with monsters. In silence, Moldus calmly acknowledges the cost of these efforts, where even victories do not bring true peace. He leaves, leaving behind a void in which Darren's thoughts begin to sound louder than any words. And only Moldus's slight smile reveals that behind the external calm lies something much deeper. The lady enters the room, and the tension instantly thickens, as if her appearance destroys the usual calm of those around her. There is a quiet confirmation of expectations in his gaze, where fatigue is mixed with the inevitable acceptance of what is happening. The atmosphere around them grows cold, and even the knights feel their confidence dissolving before an invisible pressure. Celia looks calm next to him, but Darren can't help but doubt whether he will be able to fit into this alien order. The sudden shift to the mundane breaks the tension when the mere thought of food sounds almost absurd. Celia brings warmth with a vibrant spontaneity, breaking the heaviness of the moment with her unexpected sincerity. And in this chaotic mixture of emotions, even the Rapan feels how the tension gives way to a strange, awkward peace. Rapan watches as Celia's lightness fills the room with warmth, and even the strict boundaries begin to seem insignificant against the backdrop of her sincerity. In the noisy hall, the knights delightedly consume the feast, praising Rapan's generosity. Obi, si, feeling the rare warmth of care amidst the strict service. Rapan gathers them together with gentle confidence, filling the space with the light of hope and the promise of a new beginning for the squad. Celia playfully emphasizes their unity, as if weaving threads of trust, and turns her attention to Rapan with a slight but meaningful smile. Rapan is taken aback by the sudden attention, her heart skipping a beat as if her past and expectations collided in an instant. Words about Julius trouble her soul, raising doubts and shadows that she had tried to hide from herself for so long. The knights, filled with genuine admiration, unwittingly reveal the truth, forcing Rapan to confront the feelings she had been avoiding. Knights with flaming eyes are drawn to Rapan, their sincerity breaking down her inner walls and making her heart tremble. Embarrassment grips Rapan as she feels their warmth, as if a forgotten sense of belonging is slowly returning. The thought of Julius sparks a quiet hope, but then drags with it the weight of uncertainty and the past. Rapan gently takes control of the situation, directing attention and creating a sense of security amidst the general unrest. Celia, surrounded by people, feels a strange warmth for the first time, not believing that she can be part of this sincerity. The atmosphere gradually softens, anxiety recedes, giving way to quiet acceptance and fragile trust. Celia takes a sip, as if trying to drown her doubts, but the emotions still remain, filling her to the brim. Celia shares a moment with Rapon with a warm smile, filling the air with a lightness that conceals a subtle tenderness. Rapon, hiding his excitement behind restraint, feels his heart treacherously squeeze from the unusual warmth and closeness. Celia, as if not noticing her confusion, gently plays with words and feelings, drawing Rapon ever more deeply into this fragile attraction. Celia's thoughts reach for a simple explanation, where fears are just shadows among a multitude of worries, and not a sentence of fate. Among the knights, she remains calm, accepting their attention, but inside there remains a quiet wariness before this warmth. In the golden light of her new home, Celia takes a step forward, where the joy of others sounds louder than her quiet inner turmoil. The expanse opens up before her, filling the air with lightness, but a cautious wariness still lives in her soul. Leaning towards Ran, Celia holds him with tender care, as if trying to maintain a fragile balance within herself. Celia adjusts Ran's collar with gentle care, a quiet promise of safety and trust in the gesture. She guides him further, remaining calm, as if trying to maintain order in the midst of new, unfamiliar circumstances. Celia's gaze becomes more serious as her thoughts lead her to rumors and the image of a saint destroying her previous illusions. A different image appears before her, cold, distant, unlike the one she once imagined. There is a hint of anxiety in these thoughts, as if a hidden truth is slowly beginning to emerge through doubts. Celia presses her lips together, trying to push away the growing anxiety, but the inner voice no longer gives her peace. Celia refuses to blindly believe other people's words. Her doubts become stronger than imposed truths and expectations. In the depths of her thoughts, an anxious choice arises, where fate is already pulling the threads, forcing her to decide one day who to trust. B smiled with a cheeky warmth, as if the game had begun without warning, and there was already a challenge in his gaze that only Celia could understand. B gently pulled Celia closer, allowing her dream to become almost a reality for a moment, as if all the barriers between them had disappeared. B stepped back with a touch of casualness, leaving Celia with only the promise of a future in which he would still be one step ahead. Celia flared with stubbornness, clutching the fabric, and in her eyes there flashed a desire to prove to B that she was no longer who he thought she was. A quiet understanding was born in Celia's eyes, where the resentment dissolved, giving way to a new feeling, to which B had involuntarily led her. B flushed with lively delight, clenching his fists, and pride for Celia flashed in his gaze, as if he had already seen her stronger and bolder. B frowned only for a moment, acknowledging the danger, but Celia's curiosity drew him back to a game he wasn't used to giving into. Celia gently but persistently reached out to her desire, and B responded with a slight smile, which already sounded like a refusal. B suddenly flared up, latching onto Hersey's name, and in his abrupt movement, there was a spark of jealousy that surprised even Celia. A memory of Hersey among the beasts flashed through B's mind, and the comparison made his heart clench more than he expected. B hugged Celia impulsively and almost childishly, hiding his anxiety behind a stubborn tenderness that made her feel cramped and warm at the same time. Celia froze, feeling the weight of this emotion, and a drop of doubt flickered in her eyes before she gathered her courage again. Celia calmly drew the line, and B, flushed with joy, accepted her terms with such enthusiasm as if it were the most generous gift. B beamed nonchalantly, raising his hands, and Celia felt a strange relief, allowing the thought of his conversation with Hersey to become almost natural. The knights froze, unable to hide their amazement, and their gazes were glued to what was happening, where the usual order suddenly gave way to an almost childish delight. B couldn't help but smile as he watched the animals roll around in the grass, and even Ran allowed himself a rare softening of his gaze at this carefree picture. They looked closely, noting the unusualness of the creatures, and Ran calmly confirmed that they belonged to Hersey, as if they were talking about something familiar. The knights watched as the animals responded obediently, and Ran caught a disturbing sign in this, hinting that there was something more hidden behind this idol. The knight quietly noted the obvious, watching Celia from a distance, a restrained assessment of what was happening flickering in his gaze. Celia looked at the animals with gentle surprise, and a feeling flashed through her mind that Bee and Ran had already found a common rhythm. The knight turned to his comrade, as if sharing an observation, and a hint of a topic that they had not yet dared to reveal hung in the air. The knight squinted, peering into the details, but even his careful gaze yielded no answer, leaving only a slight tension and guesswork. Celia turned sharply, her gaze flashing with indignation as she noticed how the knights had become too carried away by the forbidden liberties. The knight was at a loss for words, and tension instantly gripped him, as if the situation itself had gotten out of control. Commander Ezreen appeared with cold determination, and the air around him seemed to tighten under the weight of his displeasure. His stern gaze fell upon the offenders, turning a minor scene into a serious offense where excuses no longer mattered. The sentence sounded merciless, and the knights rushed from their place, taking with them belated remorse and dull shame. Durin moved closer, his voice falling on Celia like a heavy reproach, as if her calmness only increased his irritation. He continued to speak with increasing severity, and in every movement one could feel how the word discipline was becoming almost a personal oath for him. A cold determination flashed in his gaze, and this short repetition sounded no longer like an explanation, but like a warning. But the sudden image broke the tension, and B, beaming with carefree joy, destroyed the severity of the moment with his lively, almost puppy-like energy. Durin froze, thrown off his rhythm, and even his stern expression wavered under this unexpected interruption. He tried to regain his seriousness, but a shadow of uncertainty appeared in his words, as if his previous sternness no longer sounded so convincing. Darren chided them quietly, his voice betraying weariness at the others' carelessness, as if the efforts of some were devalued by the ease of others. Celia lowered her gaze, and there was a cautious attempt to change the subject in her tone, as if there was more behind the words. Darren frowned, catching the disturbing rumors, and a doubt flashed in his eyes that he was reluctant to admit out loud. He answered calmly, almost detachedly, as if trying to maintain a balance between the facts and what he did not want to believe. A softness entered his expression, and the tension gave way to a reserved understanding that he did not immediately allow himself to show. Celia looked at him warmer, and a sincere gratitude lit up her gaze, softening everything that remained unsaid. The words came out softly, but their weight was unexpectedly heavy, and for a moment Darren seemed to lose his footing. He flushed with confusion, not immediately understanding where the conversation was leading, and in this sharp response there was a flash of genuine vulnerability. The realization came suddenly, and Darren straightened up, trying to regain control, as if clinging to his familiar sternness. As the meaning of the assignment became fully clear, seriousness flashed in his gaze, displacing his previous uncertainty. He froze, gathering his thoughts together, and the tension in his features became quieter, turning into a restrained determination to accept everything as a duty. Celia introduced Ran carefully, and Darren, holding him in his arms, felt how something far more willful lurked behind the soft exterior. As soon as the tension flared, Ran suddenly showed his temper, and Darren involuntarily jerked away, not expecting such a violent reaction. Bee appeared next to him, full of friendliness, and his lively warmth contrasted sharply with Rand's prickly wariness. Celia calmly handed over the concern, and Doreen accepted it without further ado, allowing the responsibility to fall on his shoulders a little heavier than before. He remained standing, watching Celia's departing figure, and next to him, the animals seemed to have already begun to live by their own rules. Celia knelt, and the cold light of the hall seemed to intensify the gravity of the moment, where her name sounded like the beginning of a new path. Masked figures stood frozen along the walls, and Celia felt their silent presence fill the space with an unsettling severity. A voice full of lazy authority invited them closer, and Celia stepped forward, feeling the boundary between peace and danger disappear. He lay there casually, playing with the berries, and a hint of mockery crossed his gaze, as if the seriousness of what was happening was just a joke to him. Celia stopped at the threshold, and he was already setting the rules, in which her silence became part of his game. His invitation sounded light, but behind the tone there was a pressure that made Celia's insides clench. He chuckled more quietly, and something dangerous flashed in that look, promising that their conversation was just beginning. He lazily picked at the bunch, watching Celia through the play of light, as if her restraint only further piqued his interest. Celia looked up, and a sudden recognition flashed in her eyes, quiet and warm, as if thought had overtaken caution. Iris smiled lazily, playing with the bunch, and his gaze slid over Celia with mocking interest, as if he had already figured her out. Celia sat up straight, holding back her emotions, and her silence became a shield behind which she hid her caution in front of Iris. Iris spoke softly, but there was a catch in his words, where curiosity was intertwined with subtle pressure. A shadow of seriousness flickered in his gaze, and the name of the power sounded as if something far more dangerous was hidden behind it. He stood up abruptly, interrupting the conversation, and the space seemed to shrink, obeying his sudden decision. Iris approached Celia with a soft smile, a hint of tension in it that promised their game was just beginning. Harish descended from the heights abruptly and silently, like a shadow, and even the air around him trembled at his appearance. He looked up, wary and alert, sensing the alien presence before he could even see it. His attention immediately switched to Ran and Bee, and in that brief glance there was a flash of recognition and hidden tension. Ran approached, his golden gaze filled with a knowing silence, as if he was waiting for an answer that would change everything. Harish leaned closer, and there was a strange honesty in his voice, where animals seemed more understandable to him than people. He looked closely at Ran, and the name spoken in his mind became the first step to an unexpected connection. Ran looked straight ahead, and in the silence it felt like an unspoken agreement had already formed between them. Ran quietly indicated his departure, and Bio became wary, sensing that there was more to those words than just a promise to return. The answer vanished into the air with uncertainty, and a feeling hung between them as if the separation might drag on longer than they would like. Harish spoke calmly, but there was a shadow in his words, and Ran sensed a warning hidden behind the observation. Ran changed instantly, and a wild force flared in his movements, making the air heavier and more dangerous. His gaze became cold and alien, and Harish realized how close he had come to the edge beyond which there was no longer mercy. Harish only grinned, taking this as confirmation, and his confidence sounded like he hadn't come by chance. Celia held Ran calmly, and in that gentleness there was a power that Harish could not ignore. Ran turned away, making the boundary clear, and Harish felt his intrusion was unwelcome. But Celia's slight movement replaced the tension, and Ran, softening, allowed himself to be distracted, as if the danger had receded. Harish spoke calmly, but there was purpose in his tone, and even the night around him seemed to listen to his words about Celia and hidden power. Ran froze, a wary look flickering in his eyes as Harish's words touched on the hunger and the darkness he preferred to keep silent about. Harish suddenly took off, dragging them along with him, and Ran rushed after him, not wanting to give up the initiative. As he moved, Harish grinned, feeling the thrill of the chase, where speed became the only language. Ran responded swiftly and predatorily, and his leap was menacing, laced with cold determination. Harish paused, allowing the silence to return, and in his posture there again appeared a laziness that concealed the true tension. He glanced back at Ran, and in that calm there was an invitation that made danger sound almost like a promise. Ran took a cautious breath, his senses catching something alien that didn't fit into the usual silence of the night. Harish chuckled, guiding his thoughts, his words holding a cruel admonition that tested Ran's boundaries. Ran froze for a moment, and doubt flashed in his eyes, as if the choice before him was harder than he expected. Harish spoke coldly, and there was a dangerous understanding in his tone, where Celia's purity became both a strength and a threat. The space seemed to shrink, and behind his words a dark truth was revealed that made even the air thick. Harish retreated back to his usual ease, as if what he had said meant nothing, leaving Ran alone with this choice. There was a noise below, and fate was already throwing them a new twist, where the eight would have to make a decision faster than they wanted. Ran froze over the body, and Celia's shadow flickered in his thoughts, as if even now her image was trying to keep him from taking a step forward. But the hunger proved stronger, and the decision flared up sharply, turning doubt into cold necessity. The power burst out in a whirlwind, and the space around it trembled, as if obeying its true nature. Ran roared, and in that cry there was a mixture of rage, thirst, and something wild that could no longer be stopped. Ran straightened up in his new form, and there was a dangerous grace in his movements, as if his strength had finally found its true reflection. He touched his lips, tasting the flavor, and a dark pleasure flashed in his eyes that made even the air thicker. Harish froze, not hiding his astonishment, and his usual confidence cracked for a moment in front of what he saw. Rand smiled softly, almost innocently, but behind that lightness hid a cruel truth he had accepted too quickly. Harish looked away, trying to process the change, and for the first time there was uncertainty in his voice. Rand looked at him differently, and in that silence a line appeared that could not be crossed without consequences. A sudden thought cut through the space, and even Rand froze for a moment, as if hearing for the first time what was truly important. Rand turned around, and there was a cold logic in his voice, as if he had already made a decision, leaving no room for doubt. Harish chuckled wearily, and there was a hint of rejection in his response, as if he didn't want to accept the rules imposed by Rand. He cut the conversation off abruptly, and his tone indicated a boundary beyond which there was no longer room for argument. Rand froze, and for the first time a shadow of confusion appeared in his gaze, as if something in Harish's words was stronger than instinct. A thought flashed suddenly, and something inside him trembled, becoming the beginning of a doubt that had not existed before. Rand leaned closer, and there was a softness in his voice that seemed to shake Celia out of a troubled dream. Celia's eyes snapped open, and confusion flashed in her gaze, as if the boundary between sleep and reality had not yet disappeared. She sat up, clutching the fabric, and her breathing became ragged, as if after something too real to be just a dream. B walked in easily, filling the room with movement, and his presence brought the usual clarity to what was happening. Celia turned around, and the morning light softly touched her face, gradually erasing the remnants of the night's tension. Rand was there, and in that closeness, a strange calm arose again, as if he had been part of her world from the very beginning. His gaze warmed, and there was concern hidden behind the slight smile in his sentence. Rand gently touched Celia's shoulders, and his gesture conveyed an unexpected concern, as if he was trying to guess her desire before she spoke. He spoke quietly and almost cautiously, hiding in his smile the strange attentiveness with which he watched her every reaction. But suddenly his gaze changed, and wariness flared in him, as if something had disturbed the calm he had built up. He pulled away abruptly, leaving Celia in a confused silence where the unsaid became heavier than any explanation. The next moment, Rand was already moving faster than thought, and the tension on his face spoke of an unexpected meeting. A girl stood before him, and there was too much clarity in her gaze for it to be a chance meeting, as if she had come for a reason. Rand paused, at a loss for words for the first time, and that silence was an admission that the situation had gone beyond his control. Rand answered the girl with a slight smile, and there was a casualness in his tone that hid the usual game. He led her on, calmly explaining Celia's absence with an almost caring assurance. The girl beamed with joy, and Rand led her to Celia without hesitation, as if he knew in advance how it would all end. He moved too close, and Celia froze, feeling something personal and alarmingly warm in the gesture. The girl couldn't contain her delight, and Rand stayed close, holding Celia in this unexpected closeness. Celia looked around in confusion, and a flicker of doubt flashed in her eyes, as if what was happening was beyond her understanding. The thought of jealousy was almost a whisper, and Celia froze, for the first time seriously considering the hidden feelings around her. Rand leaned closer to Celia, and a warm, audacious glimmer of emotion flickered in his smile, as if he had already decided to stay close longer than was permitted. Celia turned away abruptly, a quiet protest in her movement that concealed her confusion at his persistence. Rand merely grinned, playing with lightness, and there was something almost deliberately provocative in his gestures. He was close again, closing the distance, and Celia felt this attention becoming too personal. The girl flared with indignation, and her emotions burst forth brightly, breaking the fragile balance of the moment. Rand stopped, and a cold note flashed in his gaze, as if he was not used to giving in even in small things. The tension rose between them, and in this clash it became clear that the game had crossed the line and would never be the same again. Rand flared with a sudden burst of power, and the air around Celia trembled as if its energy was out of control. He was instantly on her lap, hiding his storm behind innocence, and Celia felt the tension strangely dissipate. Celia froze, listening to this change, and a worry flickered in her eyes, which she was in no hurry to voice. The girl smiled joyfully, not noticing the hidden waves, and her lightness contrasted sharply with Celia's internal tension. Celia answered quietly, trying to remain calm, but there was already a hint of doubt in her voice. She looked down at Ran, and there was a hesitation in the gesture, as if she were looking for an answer to her own thoughts in him. The girl's words sounded unexpectedly direct, and Celia froze, feeling how the familiar world suddenly began to crack. Rapon laughed easily and loudly, and her words sounded like childish confidence, as if she had already decided everything for Celia. She leaned closer, lowering her voice, and there was a hint of cunning in her advice that was unexpected from such an innocent look. Harish froze in the shadows, and a look of bewilderment flashed in his eyes, as if what he had heard did not immediately fit into his usual picture of the world. Rapon spoke calmly, putting everything in its place, and her words sounded confident, as if she had long accepted this as the truth. Celia looked up in surprise, and there was more sincerity in her reaction than doubt, as if she was not yet accustomed to such rules. She thought for a moment, and a quiet determination appeared in her eyes, as if a new, still unclear decision was already being born inside her. Iris turned lazily, a hint of curiosity flickering in his gaze, as if requests rarely interested him. Celia stood opposite calmly, but there was a determination in her voice that did not allow her to retreat from her plan. Iris chuckled and took a sip, allowing himself to drag out the moment as if the other person's seriousness was amusement to him. Celia looked down, gathering her words, and her tone took on a heaviness that was connected to what she had seen when she spoke of the place. The air seemed to darken, and even Iris stopped playing for a moment, sensing the hidden threat. Celia voiced her request firmly, and there was a determination in her voice, as if she had already taken a step from which there was no turning back. Iris chuckled, not taking the words seriously, and there was a hint of mockery in his tone at the very idea of change. He looked up colder, and there was a hint of irritation in the question, as if Celia had touched upon something he preferred to ignore. A shadow of doubt flickered in his silence, but it quickly dissolved into his usual detachment. Celia's words were more precise, and Iris momentarily lost his balance, as if he had been exposed. He snapped, and his outburst revealed a vulnerability he hadn't intended to show. His voice broke off mid-sentence, and the tension hung in the air, leaving behind a feeling of breakdown. Iris threw out the words about glory with a lazy grin, as if checking to see if Celia would flinch under the glitter. A shadow of doubt flashed in his gaze, and for a moment, the usual confidence cracked. Celia answered calmly, but behind this silence was hidden the weariness of other people's rumors and mistrust. She gently but firmly outlined the goal, as if she had already seen the outcome and was not going to give in. Iris approached, his question almost a challenge, testing the limits of her resolve. A hardness flashed in her gaze, where duty came before feelings, and this only increased the tension between them. Celia finished quietly but firmly, and in her words there was a sense not of a request, but of a responsibility from which she could not turn away. Celia asks the question quietly, and there is a weariness in her voice, as if doubts are taking shape for the first time. He flares up sharply, hiding his confusion, and his answer sounds too quick to be indifferent. Iris looks at them carefully, as if trying to discern their feelings, but there remains a slight mockery in her words. Celia brings the conversation back to the point, and her confession sounds simple, but in this simplicity lies the weight of the choice. She speaks of duty as if it were the only support one can hold on to without allowing oneself to waver. Iris notices the change, and his gaze takes on a look of interest mixed with unexpected respect. The thought of Hersey comes to mind suddenly, and the name seems to hold more than just an ally. Celia agrees almost wearily, and there is a worry in her voice that she does not dare fully reveal. Iris waves his hand sharply and irritably, as if the conversation had become tiresome to him faster than he expected. He turns away, throwing words over his shoulder that sound like a condescending concession, devoid of real concern. The last phrases are cut off coldly and abruptly, cutting off the conversation, as if everything that is happening is just an annoying hindrance for him. Darren's temper flared instantly, his rage surging forward as if the truth had hit him too hard to accept. He demands an explanation, not hiding his shock, and his voice is a mixture of anger and confusion at the sudden turn of events. Celia answers calmly, almost softly, as if this decision had long been obvious to her and did not require justification. Darren turns away, his words laced with disbelief, as if there was something dangerous lurking behind this permission. His thoughts darken, and anxiety slips into them, turning into a suspicion that he can no longer ignore. His voice becomes quieter, but heavier, and in these words there is a warning addressed to Celia and to himself. Celia gently holds her anxiety in check, holding Ran close, her calm sounding like an attempt to calm not only others but herself as well. She explains patiently, as if sorting out fears, turning them into something manageable and understandable. There is a firmness in her voice, and behind it one can sense a readiness to accept any reproach, if only to see the decision through to the end. The order sounds calm but final, and in the silence after it, only the need to obey remains. When it's all over, the fatigue breaks through, and Celia allows herself a short, almost imperceptible exhalation. Ran listens intently, and a subtle understanding of other people's emotions flashes in his gaze, as if he feels more than he says. Celia looks away from unnecessary feelings, choosing duty, and her words sound like a desire to maintain a fragile balance at any cost. Doubt slowly creeps inside Celia, and even her own convictions begin to seem fragile and unstable. The shadow of the past thickens around Iris's name, and with it comes the feeling that it is no longer possible to escape this influence. She lowers her gaze, and in this silence, one can hear fear. Not of enemies, but of other people's opinions. The idea of having to become stronger sounds like a sentence that cannot be avoided, no matter how hard it is. The words come out almost in a whisper, and hidden within them is a desperate desire to prove that she is still herself. Vio's voice growls with anxiety, as if he senses her inner struggle and cannot stay away. Celia clings to a simple desire to live in peace, but this sounds too naive against the backdrop of the gathering storm. Celia clutches Ran, hiding her face, and her quiet thought sounds like an attempt to hold on to something simple and living. The pain hits suddenly, bursting through clenched lips, and in that moment, its fragility becomes almost unbearable. Hersey rushes forward, alarm flaring sharply, and his movements are full of anxiety that he cannot hide. Celia lowers her head, and the tears give away what she has so carefully kept inside, destroying her peace. She leaves without looking back, as if running is the only way to retain the last vestiges of control over herself. There is a tired tone in her voice, trying to convince her that everything is under control, although this has not been the case for a long time. A quiet gaze remains behind the glass, and in it one can read something more than simple observation, hidden, warm, and disturbing at the same time. Celia freezes for a moment when her name is called, and the sound feels like a sudden return to reality. The nights surround her, lively and noisy, sharing news, and their excitement seems to sparkle in the air. Their words ring with a rough sincerity, and Celia is at a loss, not knowing how to react. A look of surprise flashes in her eyes, almost childish, as if hope had suddenly become something real. The knights exchange excited glances, and a long-forgotten anticipation of battle can be felt in their mood. Their argument flares up easily, almost cheerfully, as if the danger for them is just a reason to come to life. A strange warmth is born in this noise and laughter, and Celia notices for the first time that there is no falsehood among them. One of the knights suggests a game, and there is a sense of excitement in his words, as if even the news of a battle becomes a reason for competition. The other one responds with a slight sneer, accepting the challenge, and the usual, almost friendly rivalry flares up between them. The thought goes deeper, and the truth emerges behind their words. No random people get here. Everyone has already proven their right to stand in the ranks. The face becomes more serious, and in this look, one can read an understanding of the price that had to be paid for this place. Celia watches from the sidelines, and in that silent gaze, there is a realization that she is now part of the same journey as them. An angry shout cut through the warm air, and the carelessness instantly crumbled, leaving behind only awkward tension. Recognition came late, and behind the audacity, there was confusion, as if the game had suddenly become real. The attempt to justify himself sounded sincere. There was more shame in it than fear, and a quiet desire to be understood. But in response came calm, soft, confident, like a reminder that joy before battle is also part of courage. In the soft light of the sunset, she allowed herself to smile for the first time, feeling a quiet pride for those who had chosen the path of the sword alongside her. Durin bowed not out of duty, but out of genuine respect, and in that gesture was born a true recognition of her strength and heart. In the noisy tavern, laughter and arguments intertwined like hot flames, where friendship was expressed through rough but sincere intimacy. She looked at them with mild embarrassment, trying to justify someone else's simplicity, not knowing how to accept this unusual freedom. He saw it differently. In this awkward joy, one could read a strength born of trust and a shared past. His words fell calmly, revealing how, at the right moment, they turned into true warriors, forgetting about frivolity. Behind their noise were years lived without rules, but tempered by the lessons of a strong mentor. And even their quarrels sounded alive, like proof that they truly exist, without hiding themselves. In this rough sincerity, truth was born. Not ideal, but warm, like the light of a fireplace in the middle of a noisy night. Behind their noise and simplicity, there was a childish indomitability, as if time had never been able to erase their former carefree spirit. But in that look, there was an understanding. They were accepted not in spite of, but precisely for the strength they had gained through their own efforts. Laughter, arguments, and even ridiculous antics suddenly seemed not a weakness, but the living breath of a family where there is no place for pretense. And a thought softly resonated in her soul. Sincerity is more valuable than strict rules if there is not a drop of lies in it. The words of the ancient instructions sounded quiet and weighty, a reminder that truth requires honesty, first and foremost, with oneself. In the dark silence, a rift opened, and the meeting became filled with a difficult past, where every word sounded like a hidden test. There was a soft mockery in his gaze, as if he saw more than he was allowing to be said, touching on the most vulnerable doubts. The answer was based on truth, but underneath it, there was a smoldering anxiety, a desire to prove that the chosen path was not a mistake. The questions deepened, revealing the loneliness hidden behind duty and a cold determination to go to the end. And yet, in the recognition of pain, there was a firmness to accept fate without retreat, even if it breaks you from within. Then the truth of the choice was revealed. Not an accident, but a conscious decision, in which was hidden both hope and an inevitable shadow. The darkness whispered confidently and sweetly, weaving into his mind the thought of purpose, from which it was no longer possible to distance himself. His breathing became ragged, as if the recognition of someone else's will touched the very essence, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. And yet the consent sounded almost calm, like a step towards the inevitable, where fear was mixed with submission. Doubt flared up inside, painful and sharp, linking someone else's fate with the one that had already become too close. The image of her fragility cut deeper than words, reminding us of the hidden truth that had been hidden from everyone for so long. The secret burned like an unhealing wound, and behind it stood efforts desperately hiding the true essence. Faced with the abyss of choice, he felt the weight of expectations pressing down, demanding that he become what he had already been called. And the final whisper sounded almost gentle, but it held the cruelty of a future where regret no longer mattered. Simon's whisper gently enveloped the consciousness, instilling confidence as if the cruel choice had long since been predetermined. Alien silhouettes flashed in the dark shadows, and the danger deepened, hinting that there was almost no time left for doubt. Thoughts led deeper, to a hidden truth, where someone else's life was held together by a fragile reason, not yet fully revealed. His gaze slid to the side, full of anxiety and innuendo, as if he already guessed the forbidden essence. But a cautious warning came suddenly, pointing to something far more dangerous than had previously seemed. The decision was taken coldly and quickly, like Simon's order, in which there was no room for hesitation or pity. And with it came a promise of help from Simon, quiet, but filled with a power that could change the course of impending events. A slight uneasiness gripped Bio as the thought of the forbidden seemed strangely attractive and almost naive to him. Rana's memory flashed back to a previous conversation where a strict prohibition left behind only quiet bewilderment. Biot's simple logic was deeply rooted, turning words into an absolute truth without question. Rana's suspicion flared suddenly, coloring his thoughts with anxiety and a hint of a hidden secret. Bio's indignation burst out, destroying the calm and filling everything with hot confidence. But Rana's doubt did not disappear, returning as a soft question with no obvious answer. And in the silence, Bio realized that the truth is much more complex than a simple division into good and evil. Rand noted with cold clarity how people, when succumbing to wine, lose their minds and become pitifully vulnerable. Biot captured this thought gently, adding that intoxication blurs boundaries and dulls the soul's vigilance. Celia's gaze warmed, but there was a hint of worry in it, for in such states, words lose weight and control, and when their fingers touched, a quiet truth flashed in the gesture. Weakness can reveal what the mind hides. Bio watched Rand thoughtfully, feeling how hard it was for him to keep his inner beastly nature on the edge. The question slipped out of his mouth, filling the silence with genuine incomprehension and quiet curiosity. Rand openly acknowledged a simple truth. Freedom is felt more vividly when you shed human boundaries. And in the silence of the night, Bio realized that people also seek a similar feeling, albeit in other, more dangerous ways. Celia appeared in the silence of the night like a tired light, hiding behind her calm the traces of past tension. Bio flushed with excitement, and Rand became wary, sensing something unusual and alarming in her appearance. Celia's slight smile didn't hide the truth. There was a scent in the air that spoke of a breached boundary. Rand noted this silently, and a look of understanding, mixed with slight condemnation, flashed in his eyes. Celia tried to move away, to hide in her usual movements, as if washing away the remnants of the alien state. But a sudden weakness pierced her body, and the scarlet drop became an alarming sign of hidden tension. The inner balance was shaken, leaving behind only a silent question and a premonition of impending disaster. Celia noticed with alarm how the mark of the past on her body became deeper, as if the pain had decided to remind itself of itself. Rand paced restlessly behind the door, sensing something was wrong and trying to knock through the growing tension. Bio stood frozen in the hallway, taking in the unsettling silence and unsure whether to intervene. The scent, subtle but sweet and heavy, suddenly revealed the truth, making Rand even more wary. The thought that came to Bio was naive, but it sounded like an attempt to explain what was happening through something familiar. When the door opened, Celia's fatigue became obvious, as if she were carrying an invisible burden. And in that moment, anxiety took shape. Rand realized that behind her weakness lurked something far more dangerous. Celia fell into a restless sleep, her frail body feeling exhausted, as if her strength had suddenly left her. Bio stood nearby, confused, and Rand looked at him intently, feeling that there was something wrong about this. A sudden movement broke the silence as Rand moved closer, driven by anxiety and a strange instinct. His gaze flashed with realization, refusing the simple explanation and clinging to something more frightening. There was a gaping emptiness inside Celia, as if someone's force had torn all the accumulated energy out of her without a trace. The mark on her skin pulsed, revealing a secret. Something was slowly sucking the life out of her. And in the dark depths of this truth, a feeling of someone else's presence arose, as if someone's will was behind what was happening. Rand realized with cold clarity that Celia's wound was not being fed by a living creature, but by something far more alien and dangerous. The thought of deliberate harm flashed through Bio's mind, making him feel like there was some evil intent behind it. The silence of the room became heavy as Rand realized this was only the beginning of the impending threat. Bio's anger flared brightly, filling him with determination to find the culprit at any cost. Rage gripped him to the limit, turning his fear for Celia into a burning desire to destroy the source of pain. Bio's rage flared, breaking his control. But Rand firmly directed his anger towards salvation, not destruction. The realization hit hard. Celia's condition was critical, and delay could cost her life. Anxiety gripped the space as the thought of possible loss pierced Bio, causing him to freeze. Rand, without hesitation, took the decision upon himself, leaving behind only the confidence of a quick return. And in the silence that followed, Bio was left alone, holding on to fear and hope, while Celia fought for her life. In the tense silence, Rand was the first to sense the change, as Celia's faint movement broke the oppressive stillness of the room. His appearance was almost unreal, power and light intertwined, giving his appearance a predatory and majestic grace. Bio watched in confusion as Rand reached out to Celia, driven by his determination to save her at any cost. A clear goal burned in his gaze, to return what was lost, even if it meant giving up a part of himself. Celia's lifeless body seemed fragile, and every second increased the anxiety, squeezing the space around her. Rand's command sounded like law, sealing the room from the outside world so that not a drop of power would escape. But in this tension, a shadow of danger flickered. An alien thought reminded him that such power could have unpredictable consequences. Ran caught the sweet, frighteningly pure scent of power, which contained a threat that could destroy even the bearer. In this radiance, Hyun felt a strange hunger, as if someone else's energy was beckoning and disturbing, awakening something forbidden. His movements became sharper, almost predatory, as he approached Celia, driven by a mixture of fear and irresistible attraction. A glowing energy burst from his lips, turning into a stream, as if life itself was seeking an outlet through his body. He held back the power, directing it carefully, afraid to break the fragile source to which he was tied. Darkness and light intertwined as the stream became deeper, more dangerous, and in this action lay the line between salvation and destruction. Bio stood frozen at the door, stunned by what he saw, unable to take his eyes off the strange and disturbing ritual. Bio froze in confusion as what he saw seemed too close to him, almost forbidden, as if the boundaries of what was permitted had almost been violated. Hyun pulled away with a hint of irritation, trying to hide his inner storm and emphasize that what was happening was only necessary. The bead's radiance swirled, drawing in power, as if the very energy of the world were submitting to its will and responding to its call. His palms lay carefully, but in the depths of his gaze, one could read concern for the fragile life lying unconscious before him. Thoughts raced, clinging to duty and danger, because ahead loomed a path where it was impossible to remain weak. Bio felt fear intertwined with determination, for the loss could prove too high a price. Ran touched the floor softly, but a firmness flashed in his eyes, promising to go to the end, no matter what. He was burning with determination to do everything for Celia. Celia woke up in the silence of the room, but a strange uneasiness was creeping through her body, as if something had subtly changed inside. Her thoughts were confused, and her weakness echoed with anxiety, as if an invisible force was still holding her on the edge. Bio entered cautiously, pressing Ran close, and his gaze showed concern mixed with uncertain hope. He tried to remain calm, but the tension broke through every movement, betraying a hidden anxiety. The joy of the meeting flared brightly, but behind it lurked the shadow of an impending separation and inevitable trials. Celia froze in confusion, realizing that her choice had already become entangled in the destinies of those around her. The sudden embrace destroyed the distance, turning anxiety into a quiet closeness where feelings spoke louder than any words. Bio was overcome with emotion, hugging Celia so tightly as if the fear of losing her had already become a reality, and not just a shadow. His anxiety was breaking through, turning into a stubborn determination to be there, even if it meant breaking boundaries. Celia felt warmth and sincerity, but behind them lurked a danger that was reminded of by the depleted energy. Ran intervened gently, his voice calm but wary of the possible consequences. Bio tried to act confident, but his gaze betrayed inner doubt, as if he himself did not believe his own words. Celia reasoned carefully, clinging to logic to push away the fear that was quietly growing inside her. Ran felt more than he said, and in his silence there was hidden a premonition of trouble that had not yet had time to take shape. Bio clung passionately to Ran's words, as if they justified his fear of losing Celia. Their fingers almost touched, but an invisible line of duty and danger remained between them. His anxiety flared up again, for the weakening of her power sounded like a sentence from which there was no escape. Celia answered softly, but her gaze hid a cold determination to face her fate alone. Celia pushed him away gently, hiding behind her calm her decision to leave alone, as if her path had already been decided. Bio couldn't bear it any longer, and the pain broke through his restraint, reflected in his trembling gaze and ragged breathing. His desperate cry pierced the silence, revealing the truth about the dark mark left on her by someone's evil will. The appearance of strangers broke the fragile tension, and their calm sounded almost like mockery among the heated feelings. Bio turned sharply, and Celia froze, as if caught between duty and the sudden awkwardness of the moment. Ran only sighed quietly, as if he already knew that what was happening was only the beginning of even more difficult trials. Celia shuddered, as if reality itself had cracked under the weight of what she had heard, and a chill of alarm slid across her skin. Malaya's name escaped her lips almost soundlessly, filling the air with hidden fear and the inevitability of a secret being revealed. Beside her, a quiet figure tried to keep her from falling into panic, gently guiding her back to her fragile balance. The companion's gaze was clear and firm, as if she had already accepted the truth and did not allow doubts to ruin the situation. Celia lowered her eyes, and a heavy sense of doom flashed in them, because now it became clear that there was nothing left to hide. Celia held herself steadfast, hiding her anxiety behind a cold calm, as if the scar had no power over her fate. Rapon watched softly, sensing the underlying tension but choosing not to push, instead gently guiding him toward trust. Her words of help were quiet, but they carried a power that could destroy the walls Celia had erected. The sudden touch knocked the ground out from under my feet, and the usual confidence cracked, giving way to confusion. Celia found herself a prisoner of her own feelings, where fatigue and doubts were intertwined into a tight knot. Rapon spoke about the purpose of the meeting, and there was a hint of seriousness in her voice that concealed something more. The truth about the dark energy came suddenly, like a blow, revealing a secret that Celia had tried to keep in the shadows. Celia listened as the tension slowly thickened, the calm tone concealing a far more disturbing truth. Rapon dispelled fears with gentle confidence, as if she knew the outcome in advance and had the situation under control. A silence of anticipation hung in the room, where every glance sought answers that no one dared to voice. Celia looked down at the page, feeling the chill of foreboding sink deeper with each line. The realization hit her sharply and mercilessly. This was not a curse, but something far more chaotic and dangerous. Moldus explained in a measured tone that even controlled magic carried a hidden threat if interference became excessive. He elaborated on the distinction between natural force seeking balance and artificial force breaking order for the sake of human will. And his explanation came with a warning. Constant use disrupts fragile connections, causing energy to become distorted. When the limit is crossed, the very fabric of magic begins to crack, spinning out of control and causing destruction. The outcome becomes inevitable. The accumulated power collapses back, striking at those who dared to subdue it. Moldus described chaos as a wound in the very fabric of the world, where energy is distorted and gives birth to something alien and dangerous. He explained that even the slightest gap becomes a gateway through which entities penetrate that feed on the disrupted order. With a restrained expression, Moldus hinted that such faults could disappear, leaving behind only traces. But now his attention was focused on one case where the usual laws ceased to apply. Celia felt a cold fear as she realized that the piece of chaos inside her had not disappeared, but had begun to quietly devour her from the inside. Rapon calmly conveyed the tower's words, and they echoed helplessness in the face of chaos, as if even higher powers were powerless. A look of alarm flashed in her eyes, as the knowledge turned out to be fragmentary, leaving more questions than answers. She explained the nature of the threat. A particle of chaos is born from mistakes and becomes a gateway for the alien. A sense of alien presence hung in the silence, hinting that someone already understood more than they did. Rapon gently led to the idea of Malai as the only one who was capable of intervening in this dangerous knot. Celia realized with bitterness that everything she believed in turned out to be a lie, and the old fear lost its former meaning. Thoughts tore her apart from the inside, returning her to the origins of pain, where every step was dictated by an alien, imposed horror. Tears slid down her cheeks as the memory came alive, revealing years of loneliness and constant expectation of punishment. She recalled how fear forced her to push people away, sacrificing warmth for the imaginary salvation of those around her. Celia cringed, trying to keep herself under control, but the anxiety had already crept deeper, leaving a tremor in her body. The words about chaos sounded like a sentence, destroying the last illusions and revealing the alien will behind her suffering. Rapol noticed her condition, realizing that behind the outward calm there was real shock. Celia, despite her trembling, clung to control, asking questions as if that could keep her from falling apart. The explanations became clearer, revealing a frightening similarity between chaos and living beings. The room filled with a heavy understanding, where every detail only intensified the feeling of impending danger. Even the gratitude sounded quiet and tired, as if Celia already felt her fate slipping through her fingers. Celia, suppressing the storm inside, tried to leave, hiding her fear behind her haste, as if running could drown out the truth. But she was stopped, and her fragile resolve cracked when someone else's concern proved stronger than her attempts to hold on. In that touch, she found support without meaning to, allowing herself to be weak for a moment in the midst of the disturbing light. Words of comfort enveloped her softly, But inside, a new feeling was already being born: suspicion and cold awareness. Left alone, Celia listened to the silence, where an invisible threat seemed to be breathing behind her. Thoughts became sharper, turning into a determination to get to the bottom of the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. In the darkness of her memories, images of falling and whispers that pushed her towards the abyss, breaking her former faith, emerged. And with the pain in her chest came a question that tore everything apart. Why did they want to destroy her if she was just a victim of someone else's game? Celia, looking at the light outside the window, finally makes a decision to regain control of her life. But behind her, an alarm sounds. If war comes and she suffers, what will those around her do? Rand can't just wait. He feels like he has to act and protect her, not stand aside. Even in his beast form, his determination is evident. He's willing to help, even if just a little. Vio understands that Celia has a strong will, but she can't do it alone. She needs allies. And then the question arises, who can she trust in such a situation? The answer comes quickly: those who are already connected to them and can help. The first step is obvious: go to the training ground, where she can find support and strength. Heavy breathing breaks, fatigue weighs down, but thoughts still return to the one whose presence is overwhelming. Her cold gaze comes to mind, like ice, from which you can't hide even among your own. A smile slips through, but there is more tension in it than lightness, as if an admission of one's own helplessness. Celia's image remains motionless and distant, like a star, shining but out of reach of simple conversation. The realization of her power is more frightening than an open threat, because the silence next to her becomes oppressive. Thoughts thicken, anxiety grows, and even the air around seems to be saturated with hidden tension. And suddenly everything changes. Familiar silhouettes break the heaviness, bringing with them unexpected relief. Bee easily wins hearts. His gentleness and trusting nature make even the sternest knight smile. Ran, watching from the side, cannot help but feel worried about Celia, hiding her seriousness behind calm. Bai and Ran realize that they cannot reveal themselves, and so they look for a way around this by remembering Garis. One of the knights, not knowing the truth, enthusiastically picks up Rana, rejoicing at the unexpected find. An idea arises among them to take Bai and Ran into the house. The knights had no idea how important all this was for Celia, but even in this ease, caution remains, because the commander may soon return, and then everything will have to be explained. Ran, clutched in someone else's arms, struggles to contain his rage as Bee tries to calm him down, feeling the tension building. Ran's thoughts return to Celia, to the threat that looms over her, and the fear that there is almost no time left to protect herself. Celia and the words about the possible danger appear before his eyes, and Ran cannot get rid of the horror of losing her again. Bee feels the rage boiling within Rana, and his determination to get rid of the threat becomes frighteningly firm. Ran can no longer restrain himself. A beastly force flares up within him, and he rushes towards Celia, not thinking about the consequences. The knights feel a sharp gust of wind, not realizing that it is only an echo of Ran's awakened power. Amidst the hustle and bustle, a Shula appears, noticing the strangeness of what is happening and trying to understand the source of the danger. Awareness comes instantly, anxiety intensifies, because what is happening is beyond the ordinary. Ran finally loses control, and his anger bursts out, frightening everyone around him with his fury. His power demands immediate release, and the tension reaches its limit, threatening to destroy everything around him. Shula bursts in with alarm, her appearance disrupting the fragile calm, as if she were bringing news of trouble. Celia greets her calmly, but there is an underlying tension in the air, an expectation of something inevitable. Shula explains her arrival, and there is a feeling between them that the conversation will be far from simple. The question of war sounds difficult. Celia's confirmation makes the reality even more frightening. The thought of Rana and Bee slips through her mind with unease, but Celia tries to hide her anxiety behind the decision to leave them. Shula objects sharply, sensing a danger that Celia doesn't seem to fully acknowledge. The tension reaches its peak when Shula hints at what happened the night before, leaving Celia frozen in the face of the unknown truth. Shula cautiously acknowledges Celia's feelings for Bee and Ran, but behind the softness of her words lies a disturbing warning. In her thoughts, they are no longer sweet companions, but predatory creatures whose nature is cruel and dangerous to people. Celia tries to object, clinging to her old image, but doubt begins to slowly creep into her confidence. Shula recalls a recent scene where B was surrounded by a strange, threatening aura, like a harbinger of trouble. The picture becomes more brutal. Only her intervention then saved people from a sudden attack. Celia doesn't hide her shock, for the first time admitting the thought that B could have caused harm. Yet Shula insists. Even reason cannot completely suppress instincts, which means the danger remains. Shula calmly shatters Celia's illusions, revealing that her belief in B and Rand's harmlessness is merely a desire to see the world as a gentler place. She insists that they cannot be left uncontrolled, because protection must extend not only to them, but also to people. Celia hesitates, realizing that caring can turn into a threat if she closes her eyes to reality. Then Shula reveals a new detail. Moldus has already intervened, deciding to influence the situation and give Celia support. Memories emerge, connecting her to the past, where she was already assigned a special role next to this decision. Shula takes the initiative without hesitation, turning the conversation into a cold examination, where Celia suddenly finds herself not a heroine, but an object of examination. Her gaze is stern and impartial, as if feelings are superfluous here, and only the truth hidden beneath the outer appearance is important. Celia feels embarrassed and tense, but gives in, understanding the seriousness of what is happening and the hidden threat to her condition. Meanwhile, Bai and Ran watch from the sidelines, anxiously aware that their fate is becoming increasingly tied to Celia's decision. The thought of going to war together flares up unexpectedly, giving the moment the weight of an inevitable choice. And in this clash of wills, a new determination is born, in which Celia no longer retreats, accepting her role to the end. Peter reports hastily to Darren, his voice filled with the tense responsibility for the preparation. Darren looks coldly at the documents, as if sensing hidden flaws and threats in advance. The evening deepens as a guest approaches them, bringing with him a slight hint of anxiety. Celia greets him calmly, but the air is already thick with tension from unspoken intentions. Iris hides her sarcasm with a soft smile, hinting at the risk of Celia's decisions. Celia responds firmly, not allowing anyone to doubt her determination and control over the situation. And at this moment, a new figure appears. A healer, whose presence changes the balance of power and adds intrigue. Iris introduces the doctor, and the calm of the scene only masks the growing tension between those present. Celia feels the stranger's intervention as a cold intrusion, where concern sounds too intrusive. The stranger leans closer, his words tinged with a soft obsession that makes you uneasy. A hidden power flashes in his gaze, turning attention into pressure and participation into dangerous attachment. Celia freezes, feeling the boundaries being erased, and someone else's will emerging behind the politeness. His tone becomes firmer, almost commanding, depriving her of choice and subordinating what is happening to his decision. Celia confidently leads the squad through the forest, where the shadows of the past intertwine with the anxious anticipation of the journey ahead. Her words sound calm, as if control of the situation has finally returned to her hands. The knights follow her with respect, recognizing her strength and experience, forged through training. There is excitement in their voices, but behind it lies anxiety before a real fight. Celia accepts their confidence with a slight smile, as if allowing herself to breathe a sigh of relief for the first time. For a moment, her doubts recede, giving way to a fragile feeling of having made the right choice. But the silence of the room brings her back to reality, reminding her that the journey is only just beginning. The arrival of Albia and Hersey disrupts the peace, bringing a bold energy and a hidden threat into the space. Celia greets them with restraint, maintaining her dignity even in the face of their provocative manner. Albia watches intently, as if assessing not only the words, but also the strength of the person standing before her. Hersey, on the other hand, is free and playful, diffusing the tension with his cheeky ease. Ran and Bee watch the proceedings warily, sensing the strangeness and subtle change in Hersey's behavior. The sudden transformation only heightens the tension, revealing the dual nature and hidden power. His words sound almost playful, but they contain a dangerous knowledge that connects Celia to secrets. An explosion of emotions destroys the remnants of calm, turning the meeting into a clash of characters and hidden intentions. Hersey suddenly breaks into the silence, and his pressure instantly shatters Celia's usual calm. The conversation takes a serious turn when the dark energy hidden within her body is mentioned. Albeit confidently, reveals her awareness, offering help as something inevitable and necessary. Celia hesitates for only a moment, allowing the outside intervention to get closer to her secret. The tension mounts as she decides to reveal the truth hidden beneath clothes and silence. The touch reveals the mark, and with it, a dangerous connection to chaos that can no longer be ignored. Albia gently touches Celia's mark, and the magic flares with an unsettling light, revealing their dangerous connection. Her voice becomes serious, warning of the destructive proximity of dark energy and the inevitable consequences. It's as if a heart appears before my eyes, engulfed in chaos, where life is slowly being displaced by an alien force. Celia realizes the meaning of what she has heard, and a painful understanding of her own fate appears in her gaze. Despair breaks through, forcing her to shrink under the weight of inevitability and fear. The thought of living with this mark until the very end breaks her inner balance, leaving only a dull anxiety. Ran and Bee exchange worried glances, feeling the gravity of what is happening and Celia's pain, which cannot be hidden. Albia quietly admits her powerlessness, and her voice carries a rare sincerity and regret. Celia, despite her inner storm, maintains her dignity, accepting the help with quiet gratitude. Hersey watches lazily, hiding his interest behind a carefree pose, but his attention does not wane. His displeasure slips through a slight mockery, as if he is not used to being left out. Celia gently guides the conversation, regaining control and subtly influencing the mood of those around her. Her words provoke an unexpected reaction, and for a moment, a shy vulnerability appears in Hersey. Albia can't help but reveal her weakness for warmth, as she notices how Ran and Bee attract each other's gazes and soften the tense atmosphere. Her embarrassment flares brightly as Celia's observation breaks through her usual cold mask. Celia gently connects them, emphasizing how Ran and Bee are drawn to Albia and find peace with her. There is a slight playfulness in her gestures as she invites us to close the distance and embrace this warmth. Albia, losing confidence, still succumbs to temptation and cautiously reaches out to Ron as if for a rare tenderness. The touch is unexpectedly warm, almost fragile, and genuine admiration flares up within her. She leaves, hugging Ran to her, but behind her remains the worry that being alone with them might reveal more than she wanted. Celia leaves, leaving behind a soft glow of confidence, like a quiet promise before the coming storm. A warm, almost awkward silence falls over the room as Albia hugs Ran, hiding her confusion behind her usual restraint. Her thoughts are swirling anxiously because her feelings are revealed too clearly, as if someone has looked deeper than is permitted. She detects something frighteningly precise in Celia, the ability to see souls, breaking down any protective walls. Night thickens around the camp, where the fire casts living shadows, and Celia appears among them as a calm center. Light conversation instantly enlivens the atmosphere, and attention is involuntarily drawn to it, as if to a source of light. One of the knights bursts into genuine enthusiasm, greeting her with childish joy and almost reverent admiration. Celia freezes under the starry sky, catching an unexpected question about Yolia, which disturbs hidden memories. The past emerges in soft shadows, where youthful faith in Julia intertwines with present-day wariness. The knights, including Peter and his comrade, awkwardly seek forgiveness, feeling the weight of their past mistakes before Celia. Celia accepts their words with restraint, but in her silence one can sense the sting of her old mistrust. The conversation turns to Moldis and the disappearance of Yolia, revealing instability in power and troubling changes. Suspicions about the new commander-in-chief are shattered, giving way to the realization that Celia stands before them. Peter acknowledges her strength and charisma with relief, as if finding support in her amidst growing uncertainty. Around the campfire, Peter and his companions cautiously broach the subject of Yolia, hoping to share Celia's shared anticipation. Their keen interest sparks when the conversation turns to reasons for respecting him. Celia, suppressing a shudder, plunges into memories where the name of Yolia sounds almost sacred. In her thoughts, he remains an unrivaled master, whose power seemed an unattainable peak. Peter and his friend confirm this with fervor, recalling his confidence and impeccable skill. Their stories are filled with details of strict training and equal treatment of everyone, which inspired admiration. In conclusion, they acknowledged that it was Yolia who became their support, and an example of true devotion to the order. A sudden outburst of emotion flares around the campfire as the tension between Peter and his companion nearly erupts into a fight. Anger instantly gives way to awkwardness, and rudeness dissolves into quiet confusion under Celia's gaze. Celia gently lightens the atmosphere, her laughter unexpectedly warm, breaking the previous distance. The knights are struck by this light because her smile hides a completely different living side. Peter, inspired by the moment, loses his restraint and reaches out to Celia with naive sincerity. His words are filled with a confused boldness, where admiration is intertwined with an awkward impulse. But the flash immediately goes out when his comrade abruptly interrupts him, returning everything to strict reality. Celia, hiding her fatigue, calmly accepts the call when she is addressed with respect in the silence of the night. The news of an Oriental pharmacist comes as a surprise, but she rises without hesitation to meet the new need. Inside, she is greeted by a lady whose presence fills the space with a stern, almost cold concentration. The conversation quickly turns to the onset and the underlying anxiety about Celia's condition, as if time is running out. Among the herbs and tools, the intention to test her strength is revealed, as health has become part of the strategy. Celia tries to brush off the concern, but the tension in her body reveals more than words can hide. The lady firmly insists on precision, realizing that even the slightest hesitation can turn into a dangerous weakness. The lady extends her hand with gentle insistence, and in her gaze there is a subtle, almost invisible power. Celia feels a chill of doubt inside, as if the meeting was not planned by chance, but by someone's will. This feeling of pressure spreads inside, forcing you to cautiously accept the touch and hide your anxiety. She tries to ease the tension with politeness, not wanting to upset the fragile balance between them. The touch reveals something strange. Celia's pulse is barely perceptible, as if her life is hovering on the brink of extinction. The lady draws her conclusion calmly, but behind her words, one can sense the disturbing depth of hidden processes. Celia freezes when the energy center is mentioned, realizing that testing could reveal something dangerous. Mana assesses Celia with restraint, sensing something hidden in her condition that requires a careful approach. Celia cautiously keeps her distance, not allowing strangers' hands to invade her vulnerable space. There is an awkwardness in the air, and even gentle apologies cannot completely dispel the tension. Behind Mana's polite smile, there is a cold confidence, as if she sees much more than she says. Celia accepts the help, hiding her inner turmoil behind a calm exterior. The flow of energy reveals the truth, and Mana, without hesitation, asks the main question. The answer is quiet but heavy, because the cause turns out to be frighteningly unusual: a swallowed fox bead. Mana reveals a terrifying truth. The bead's power is feeding Celia, turning her into a source of alien energy. The realization hits hard. The gumiho is draining her life force, and now Celia is almost beyond death's reach. But behind this apparent immortality lies a threat. Sooner or later, the mark will begin to devour her from the inside. Mana coldly explains the paradox. As long as the power is within, neither death nor the gumiho can take it away. The decision seems cruel: deprive Celia of the bead or destroy the source of power. But the choice is not so simple. Plans take shape. The power of the gumiho can be turned into a weapon if its essence is properly channeled. In silence, a dangerous idea is born, where fear mixes with hope and hidden calculation. Mana hints at the true power of the gumiho, which can transcend even time and age. And in this dangerous radiance, the thought arises: to use this power before it destroys everything around. Celia confidently leads the squad into the forest, where the shadows deepen and a hidden danger lurks ahead. She leaves Manu behind, telling him to wait, as if sensing the impending blow of fate. Excitement erupts among the knights, as taking Ran and Bee along seems like a reckless risk. The young knight wonders who the animals will stay with, since they are too small for the forest. Doubts collide with determination, but a volunteer appears to take responsibility for their fate. Hersey appears in the thicket, his presence changing the tension to anxious anticipation. His calm hides an inner storm that only a few are able to sense. And as the squad delves deeper into the green silence, nature itself seems to hold its breath before the future. Suddenly, danger flares up in the thicket. Slugs come crashing down in a wave, breaking the peace and making hearts clench. Celia instantly takes control, directing the squad, sensing that the enemy is much closer than it appears. The knights scatter into the viscous darkness, where every step is drowned in a sticky threat. Deep in the forest, a scarlet rift opens up, pulsating with power like the living heart of the abyss. Tensions reach breaking point, and Abia takes the plunge, confronting the source of evil head-on. Its energy flares up in a blinding stream, closing the chaos and subduing the torn space. And in this flash, it becomes clear that before them is a force capable of closing even the abyss itself. The fog seems alive, thick but strangely dry, as if hiding within itself an alien, unnatural force. The squad notices a discrepancy, and anxiety begins to seep into their thoughts, breaking their confidence in what is happening. Celia catches this distortion, feeling the reality around them tremble ever so slightly. Ran reacts sensitively to changes, as if he were the first to understand that something had gone wrong. The realization comes suddenly. Celia admits her mistake, and the tension instantly thickens. Attempts to explain what is happening sound empty, because the calm around only increases suspicion. And in this silence, the main question arises, cold and sharp. Who is hiding behind all this? The air thickens into a scarlet nightmare, and the squad suddenly realizes that they are already trapped in alien hostility. Celia watches silently, feeling the truth begin to emerge through the illusion. Suspicion takes shape, and the Allies' mask cracks, revealing an alien essence. Pain and distortion tear apart consciousness, turning the mind into a battlefield between light and darkness. And in that broken gaze, a mad smile flashes, confirming the terrible guess. The world sways before Celia's eyes, and reality begins to crack like thin glass under the pressure of a nightmare. Her body falls downwards, carried away into the abyss, where shadows stretch into alien, ominous shapes. An alarming thought flashes through my mind. The enemy has understood too much and is acting too precisely. From the darkness rise multi-eyed creatures, their presence filling the air with cold terror. Realization comes slowly. This is not just an illusion, but an invasion of the mind, where fear becomes a weapon. The knights are captured, their strength drained, as the nightmarish creatures devour their life force from within. Celia, through the pain and fog, collects her thoughts, understanding the nature of these creatures and their destructive power. And in this knowledge there is an alarming conclusion. Such monsters could not have appeared here by chance. Consciousness returns with a jerk, and Celia realizes that everything around her has been destroyed by a sudden attack of nightmare. Her gaze clings to Mike, lying motionless on the ground, and anxiety flares up with a painful prick. Understanding hits hard. The squad has fallen, unable to withstand the pressure of an alien force. But fear gives way to determination as Celia rises, gathering the last of her will. A flash of energy tears through the darkness, like a challenge to the abyss itself, refusing to give in. Anxiety grips Celia's heart as she tries unsuccessfully to bring Mike back to his senses, feeling time slipping through her fingers. A sense of helplessness overwhelms her, as the spell can only be lifted through external force or by destroying the source of the darkness. The panic intensifies when Rana and Bayo are not around, and the emptiness around seems especially ominous. A sudden light breaks through the dense darkness of the forest, making one doubt the reality of what is happening, and stop the fear for a moment. In this radiance, one senses not a threat, but something else, alien to the darkness, like a thin thread of hope in the midst of despair. A vortex of light flares up around, and with it comes salvation, tearing apart the darkness and restoring hope to weakened hearts. Satisfied with the security, Celia feels the tension slowly ease, giving way to a quiet relief. Hugging her little companions, she allows herself to breathe out for the first time in a long time, feeling their living warmth nearby. As she hands over the wounded man, she is still searching for answers, trying to understand where the threat came from and why the blow was aimed specifically at her. The companion's words convey a disturbing sense of its significance, making the danger seem even more personal and inevitable. But now, survival is more important, and, putting aside unnecessary questions, they focus on keeping each other safe in this chaos. A chilling sense of impending danger penetrates her heart as it becomes clear that Celia's strength is waning and her energy is at its limit. The body weakens, breathing becomes ragged, and even standing becomes difficult, as if life itself is flowing away along with an invisible force. A stranger's touch brings him back to reality, revealing a dangerous pallor and coldness that foreshadows far more serious consequences. Decisiveness replaces doubt, and support appears nearby, ready to act, even if it requires sacrifice and effort. Celia, clenching her will, accepts the need to fight, realizing that losing consciousness now will be the end. But in the midst of weakness, a strange sensation of warmth is suddenly born, soft and enveloping, as if an unknown energy is drawn to her. Through the pink haze, Celia's consciousness wavers, and Ran appears before her, enveloped in a warm, almost unreal attraction. His presence softly envelops her, erasing anxiety and pain, as if the whole world narrows down to him alone. Celia still tries to hold on to reality, remembering the people around her and how she cannot leave them. Ran responds with calm confidence, as if everything is under control and she no longer has anything to worry about. Meanwhile, Hersey and the others sense a powerful energy, realizing that something unusual and dangerous is happening. And while Celia's body remains close to them, her mind goes deeper and deeper to Ran, into that warm and disturbingly attractive oblivion. In this warm haze, Ran carefully senses Celia's state, noticing how her energy becomes too hot and unstable. It is not desire that holds him back, but anxiety, because intimacy could harm her, despite the attraction that draws them to each other. Ran, suppressing his own feelings, realizes that he is unable to safely transfer his power to her, risking only worsening her condition. There's still a trace of strange energy trembling in the air as Ran returns to her normal form, breaking the spell and tension of the moment. Hersey watches the scene with a hint of amusement, noting the awkwardness that hangs between them after what happened. Celia, embarrassed and vulnerable, tries to hide behind the remnants of armor and dignity, not wanting to show weakness. But her inner turmoil breaks through, and her abruptness betrays a confusion she has not yet overcome. Despite this, she gathers her will, returning to the goal and the readiness to move forward, not allowing herself to stop. Her words convey a determination to see things through to the end, even if her strength is already running out and the path turns out to be more difficult than expected. Hersey accepts this without judgment, understanding the cost of mistakes and choosing to support rather than reproach in moments of weakness. Tensions ease, but anxiety remains as Hersey assesses the situation and searches for a way to protect his weakened companions. Ran stubbornly refuses to stay away, striving to be close despite the risk and her own insecurities. Celia decides to move with Ran, trusting him and feeling that it will be safer. The thought of the missing knights heightens her anxiety, forcing her to act faster and more carefully. The realization that the others can only be helped from within their dreams gives her plan a desperate determination. Ran takes it upon herself to protect Celia as she prepares to enter everyone's dreams and free everyone from the trap. Gathering her remaining strength, Celia casts aside her doubts and steps forward, ready to begin the dangerous intervention.